I'll say this real quickly. I agree with with that one announcer though. He should, when he's in the ring, he should change his name from Ray Billings to Ray Killings.
All right, we're live. We're on. Yes, we were just talking a little bit about BattleBots before we started, but how y'all doing tonight? Oh, now you get quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got Chris. How you doing, Chris?
I've been much better.
Yeah. Executioner, how you doing?
Guten Tag.
And Pip. How you doing, Pip?
I'm alright.
Yeah.
And David R. lives in the chat.
Yeah.
At least. Allegedly. How do we know you're the real David
Yeah.
R.?
Also, Shane, I don't know if Shane, I believe I told you this, but 2020 struck again. This time someone really close to me because one of my friends on Discord passed away.
No.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of him, Lieutenant Knives.
Yeah, I have kind of a distant cousin pass away, and then kind of an extended uncle pass away in like the last month or something.
Yeah. Well, the sad part is that I didn't know that he died until weeks after it happened, because like I said, I mentioned to you that he was silent for a couple weeks, and I didn't know what was going on. I was hoping he was okay. Then one morning I wake up, I check my email, I got all these messages from him, but sadly it was his brother saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, this is Lieutenant Knives' brother. I finally got into his computer. I'm sorry to say he passed away last month in October. I'm very sorry. I know he meant a lot to his online friends. I'm very sorry."
Well, sorry for your loss there.
Yeah, I mean,
for me, it was just a long day today, and all I'm really doing is the equivalent of taking money out of my left pocket and putting it in my right, but doing all this stuff to avoid the government taxing it. It just took meeting with. I gotta tell you, a good financial planner will more than pay for themselves when you're in something like that. But that took a lot longer than it was supposed to, and it cut into my podcast prep, which means I'm not going to be able to record in the morning, so I'll probably be doing prep tomorrow. The rate it's going, it might not be Sunday morning until I get recorded, which means it's going to be late for the supporters, which I apologize for in advance. Hopefully I can get it up like lunchtime on Sunday. And then for everyone else, it should be on time, 6 o'clock Sunday.
Yeah, I got work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, at least you have work. Yeah, for reasons I can't go into, I can't work for a while, and I don't think I can apply for work until my issues are over with. And in all honesty, the only thing I can think of to make a little money until I can figure this out is to sell my blood and plasma.
Yeah, that's never good.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want my job. You wouldn't.
Hello, Zero and JC. What are you asking about? We've talked about a couple of different things since we've gone. I don't know about Agorist, Rocky, but one of the things my financial planner says is my goal for you is to pay as little in taxes as we can possibly get away with.
Oh yeah. Reminds me of that funny Hollywood. Reminds me of this funny Hollywood Squares answer I was watching. I was watching the old Hollywood Squares when Paul Lynde was still alive, and one of the questions was, out of all the people when people are called into audit, what out of 10 people pay more in taxes than they filed for? And he goes, about 11. Yeah,
that's about right.
Yep. And that's the problem with the IRS. They will, from what I heard, they will, like, even if it's just like a couple bucks and all that, they'll get angry if you didn't mention it. Oh, yeah, JC, I was just talking about how we lost Lieutenant Knives last month. Don't ask how he died. His brother didn't say. I don't know what happened, but I do know he had a lot of medical issues, so I can only assume it was one of many of them.
One of those take your pick things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, especially because he was a veteran of the Australian Defense Force and was in Afghanistan, and he almost died because he got blown up by an IED, and they thankfully managed to wrap him up, though he suffered serious injuries, so he had a shot liver, his back wasn't very good.
You're never the same after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We still live in an insane where government mass theft is considered part of being an audit. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Just trying to avoid the government stealing my money.
Yep.
If I can get it to where I can pay off my house, that would be so nice.
And it's pretty funny because the news media is still ranting about how Trump won't concede, and I'm just thinking, well, that's because he's under no obligation to, not till January.
Well, conceding is not even about. It doesn't matter. He can go until doomsday and not concede. That has no part in the process whatsoever.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, can we at least learn basic civics here, people?
Yeah.
I tried making a video on that, explaining exactly what happens by what date, but
yeah, exactly. I even told that to my mom. You know, that contrary to popular belief, nobody has voted for Trump or Biden. Like you said, you know, we technically didn't vote for them on election day. Rather, we voted for the electors.
Well, and to get even more picky, because this is something that might come up the way things are going, we instructed our state legislatures who to choose as electors.
Yeah.
They're under no obligation to go with what we said, at least under the Constitution. There might be the state constitution or state laws that say something different, but under the U.S. Constitution, it's the state legislators, and they can select electors however they want.
Oh, yeah, you know. Yeah, so theoretically speaking, if the state electors decide, you know what, we don't like Biden, we're going to vote for Trump regardless, even if everyone voted for Biden, well, as you said, they can do that. They legally can do that.
Absurdistan, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I hate that the Supreme Court years ago supported the laws against so-called faithless electors. Our founders wouldn't have said faithless electors. They would have said electors doing their jobs.
Yeah.
The link to the Discord is on the screen, Anonymous. It is, or is it? Yes, it is. There at the top. If you don't want to type that mess in, you can just do discord.bagosity.tv.
Yeah.
It's there. It's underneath that. Yeah, discord.bagosity.tv and the Lord Killian Discord under that. Under where you can do a donate or a super chat. Again, I keep forgetting to put my Odyssey profile up there. The Odyssey profile is ShaneDK:4. I don't know what the :4 is all about, but
yeah. Well, I'm getting a new monitor.
Oh, cool. What kind?
It's 1440p. I just decided on that because my video content wise, like what I do, I render in 4K, but I don't necessarily need to see it in 4K. So it's more of a...
you can always watch it zoomed in to see how the 4K goes.
Yeah, I have a Sony movie studio, like Platinum 13, so it's a bit old, but it works.
Yeah. Was that one of the ones that went over to Magix with Vegas, or because Sony was gonna do like their own replacement for Vegas or something like that, and I don't know whatever happened with that.
Mine's Sony, but Magix ended up getting the whole license and whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely got Vegas. I know that because they've got it. But... Oh, Bovine Spongiform with $5 saying, Dance, Eccleston, dance. Give it about 20 seconds. I think that's the lag for that.
You mean dance, magic dance. Yeah. Dance, magic dance, magic dance. Sorry, my David Bowie impression's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if it makes a difference. There he is. There's Eccleston. I wonder if it makes a difference if you do a super chat on YouTube or over on Streamlabs. Because I think YouTube is where the lag is. If you do the super chat on Streamlabs, I'm thinking it should be pretty much instant. But also, they don't take anything out where YouTube takes whatever it is, 30% or 50% or whatever.
Speaking of YouTube, Shane, I just found another reason why you should continue to use ad block, because YouTube has a new terms of service, and they say that they can monetize videos for themselves even if they're not part of the video share program, meaning that they can be taking money from other people without their consent, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, so
That's something I thought was weird. Oh, duh, I wasn't thinking. With the way I have this new chat set up, I can only see the super chats in the window if they're YouTube super chats, so that would be a YouTube one. I should still see the Streamlabs pop up on the screen, but it won't be over there on the left. But yeah, it's always been weird to me about how, oh, here's this video that we've denied monetization for because of the content, because advertisers don't want their advertisers on this content, and that's bad, so we can't put the ads on there. Oh, you got a little piece of copyrighted music on it? Okay, we'll put ads on that.
Yeah. No, it doesn't help the fact that, it's...
folks, you need to...
What was that exact?
That's why you need to get your content from the public library, air quotes. Just ask the librarian with the salty sea dog accent.
No,
Okay.
they'll still find a way to monetize it. I mean, just look at Happy Birthday. Warner Brothers claims they own the entire song because a long time ago one of their employees created a single line, and they say, "Oh, yep, that line is ours, so we own the entire song."
Well, the courts went back on that like a year or two ago. It's public domain now, which it should have been for like decades, but it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's another problem too with copyright law. It's not even like it used to be where it's like, okay, when you file for it, you got like 5 years protection and that was it. Now it's like, nope, it's the lifetime of the author plus 100 years afterwards.
Tythorn13 had a cop follow me for 5 minutes today, obviously trying to find a reason to pull me over. Finally got a reason of your turn signal turned off halfway between your lane change on the highway. Yeah. Yeah, they do that.
And you had a bro.
Probably trying to get his quota filled before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of all these people that are saying we need to defund the police, so a lot of cities are like, okay, we're going to completely cut our funding, and then people are like, why are we getting all these traffic tickets?
Yep.
Yeah. That's why, even though I do agree, the police system in the U.S. is in serious need of reform, defunding them is not going to fix anything. And here's another thing, too, is that a lot of people are like, well, if we defund them, they won't have access to all these SWAT weapons. It's like, you do realize they often get those free from the Pentagon, right?
And Punk says, what are we talking about? Well, this is the monthly live stream for the supporters. So it's whatever the supporters want to talk about and whatever people in the chat talk about. Just whatever.
Usually it's just me and Shane and sometimes Po Boy. Pitsqueak comes in, but he rarely talks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
see, there you go.
Doesn't do a squeak throughout this whole thing.
Nah, he's too busy bird watching.
Neither a pip nor a squeak.
Yeah, he's too busy bird watching. Yeah. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, I'm gonna tell you a secret. Pitsqueak really loves birds. Not in that way, though. Just I had a conversation about him on pets.
You made it.
Yeah. And I asked him, are you a cat or a dog person? He's like, neither. Neither. I'd rather have a bird.
Bovine says, I support this channel through Super Chats, and it is much appreciated. Thank you very much. I think he might be my biggest Super Chatter.
Oh, yeah, Tythrone. I hear a lot of stories like that, like police... Like, it reminds me of this video I saw of a guy being pulled over by Border Patrol, and, like, even though it's pretty obvious he did nothing wrong and all that, they would not release him, and finally he's on a call with a lawyer, and he's like, I don't know what to do. They're not letting me leave. I've asked them, am I under arrest? They're not responding. I'm showing them all my IDs and everything, and they still won't let me go, even though everything's in order. What's going on here?
He says, I felt like I was playing 20 questions. It was clear he was trying to see if I was transporting drugs. Yeah, they tried that. I remember back when Colorado legalized marijuana and a bunch of other states started pulling people over because they had Colorado plates, and that meant they might have been transporting drugs, and the courts had to keep smacking them down saying, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And Zero says, is the idea you will remain on YouTube until you are banned? Maybe you never will be. Obviously use other platforms, but you wouldn't stop YouTube entirely if you don't have to. No, I mean, it's still the biggest audience and the biggest revenue stream. So why would I stop it?
Economic Facts and Fallacies. I've been reading that book. It's pretty good.
Well, to be fair, Anonymous, I'm pretty sure, as we said earlier, I don't think that officer was trying to be mean to Ty Throne. He was probably just one of those things where it's like, now listen here, Officer Joe, you're far behind on your quotas. I want to see more. I want to see 200 more tickets by the end of the month, or you're in trouble. Yeah. A lot of police officers have come forward and said that, contrary to what a lot of governments say, quotas do exist in many cities, and they're secretly, and they are enforced.
Yep. Also, subscribe to you on Library. Do you accept the Library coin? Well, I'll take it. I just haven't actually figured out how to turn it into dollars yet.
Yeah, same thing. I
haven't seen it on any of the exchanges I'm on. I don't want to sign up for a lot of exchanges, because every time you sign up for an exchange, they make you do that KYC stuff where you send them a picture of your driver's license and yourself holding it and everything else like that. Like, yeah, every time I turn around, there's another data breach where they've gotten, passwords and personal data. What's going to happen the first time one of these KYC databases gets breached?
Yeah, it's speaking of fraud. I was going through my emails later, and in my junk mail, I had a letter from Chase saying that there was a fraudulent account and I needed to affirm my account, and it looked all serious and all that, but there was just one little itty bitty thing that kind of makes me chuckle. Is that, guess what? I don't do business with Chase.
Yeah, there's your clue.
Yeah. Actually, it's pretty funny because, out of curiosity, I went to Chase's website, out of curiosity to see if anyone else was reporting this, and basically they just said exactly what you say to other people. It's like, listen, if there is something going on with your bank, we are not going to contact you about it.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the resources to monitor every single thing you do. If you suspect something's wrong with your account, you got to come to us. The only time they'll contact you is if, you used one of their cards or a check in their name and it bounced or something, then they're going to contact you saying, hey, what happened here? But
or if there's a lot of unusual activity and they think it might be
By the way,
all of a sudden it's being used in a different state for all these purchases, and then I go, oh, maybe we better contact them.
Speaking of stupid, of stupid laws and all that shit, I was rewatching your Kyle Rittenhouse special, and I just facepalmed at that one thing you mentioned where they arrested that one girl for first-degree murder because she killed a guy who had kidnapped her and was planning on selling her as a sex slave on the black market. It's like,
yeah,
it's pretty funny. It's like we're trying to save these women from sex traffickers. Then how come you're arresting them when they escape?
Mm-hmm.
It's,
So, Ronky, I'm not sure what your question is. Is the burden of proof a good argument against labor theory of value? I mean, they haven't proven it, certainly, but...
Yeah. And that's another thing I can never get a communist to answer. They're like, listen here, if labor is the only thing that goes into the price of the something, then that means you should be able to charge someone a lot of money knitting a sweater, and you're trying to sell the sweater to someone who lives in Louisiana.
Well, it is now, Zero, because traditionally it's been done by the states and we haven't had a national ID card. And years ago, there was this thing called the Real ID Act, one of those post 9/11 things that was this huge amount of opposition about, and it kind of snuck through the House. Well, there was all this opposition before it got to the Senate and this big public outcry about it. And so the Senate voted it down. So there was no Real ID Act. But then they snuck it in as a rider on the NDAA that year. That's one of those must-pass bills, the National Defense Authorization Act, and one of the ones they love to slip riders into.
Yeah, they slipped it in an earmark.
Yeah, and so now everyone's supposed to get these driver's licenses with this little gold star on it. And if you don't have one of those, you can't go, you can't get on a plane or take a train ride, even if you're not leaving the country.
Yep. Yeah, I know. That's what the government loves doing. Like, like going back to the state ID, it's like, oh yeah, setting up a state national ID system is a terrible idea. It's oppressive. However, if you want to drive anywhere, you need to have this card that just so happens to have your name, address, birth date, and a bunch of other personal information.
Well, I think that's the big question there, Tythorn, is who decides what the value of labor is?
Yeah, exactly.
Because as a brain surgeon, supposed to get, exactly as much, as a garbage collector or whatever.
Yeah, And like I said earlier, it's like the proof, the biggest proof to prove that the labor theory of value doesn't work is spend a lot of hard work and effort knitting a sweater, then try selling it to a guy who lives in Louisiana all year round. Yeah.
I happened to find you from the Sam Cedar video of all places. A comment told me about you. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we had one troll last time that kept saying that Sam Cedar would destroy Shane, and I jokingly said, well, yeah, Shane would lose a debate with Sam Cedar, but not because Sam Cedar's right or is a better debater, but it's because he never lets anyone talk, and eventually people just give up. Yeah.
Does that mean you have to learn to drive to get a passport or an ID? No, you don't. You can get just a regular IP without an ID without it being a driver's license.
It's very
Thank you, Anonymous. Thank you for the kind words. Yeah, Cedar's fairly easy to smack down.
No, well, the problem is that he doesn't let anyone talk. So if you were actually to go on and debate him, you'd lose the debate simply because you just get bored to tears and you're like, you know what, Cedar, I'm leaving because I'm gonna have a more productive time talking to a brick wall.
Or more likely, he cuts you off.
Yeah.
There have been reports he's done that, not just with libertarians, but other callers. They say, yeah, Cedar cut them off and just hung up on them and then claimed that, oh, well, they quit. They must not have had anything else to say. Yeah. No. The guy is dishonest trash.
Yeah.
Tom Hartman, too. Sam Cedar or Kyle Kolinsky? I don't know. I probably got to say Cedar's worse. But
who's Kolinsky again?
What's that show? I'm picturing it in my head. He's got that green neon sign in the back. But yeah, he's another guy like Cedar or Hartman. Oh, I don't know if the mic picked that one up or not. Someone's really proud to have a motorcycle out there on the road.
By the way, Shane, I mean you don't have an article dedicated to you, but apparently you were mentioned in the Rational Wiki.
Yeah, I got a couple mentions there.
Yeah, they just said, oh, he doesn't debate, he just yells and calls someone a liar and then leaves. Yeah. That's why I hate, in all honesty, that's the thing that grinds my gears about Rational Wiki is that it's called Rational Wiki. It's like
Gillian's Law.
And the funny thing is that on their page of libertarians, I went on their discussion forums and there were several people that are like, listen, I don't like libertarians either and I disagree, but don't you think it's a little mean that we're attacking them personally and, we're not actually listening to what they argue and we're not willing to hear their side? Because, I mean, the whole point of rationality is, is you listen to a person's point and if they're wrong, you debunk them through debate and evidence. You don't just dismiss them as right-wing and all that. And basically the guy got told, oh no, they deserve it. They're just as bad as creationists.
Secular talk. Thank you, Cinema Fan. It's secular talk that Kolinsky's.
Yeah. Oh, so he's one of those statheists where he's like, I'm an atheist and I will never fall for the collective group mind of religion, but then they follow the collective group mind of the state. Another good example.
Oh, and it is just so crazy lately how many people, in the skeptics movement, traditional skeptics are all like, oh, this is horrible. The election was over and Trump's trying to steal it. This is part of the process, people.
Yeah.
We don't usually go through it because one candidate gives up because they're so far behind, but this one's so close that...
Yeah. And here's another thing, too, people, that anyone who's paid attention to history would know, this isn't the first time this happened in America. It's happened several times before. In fact, there was an even worse case than this that happened back in the 1800s with the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. where he literally...
Zero. The thing about Rational Wiki there is that even when they are on the right side of something, they're terrible at arguing it.
Yeah.
They use fallacy after fallacy, and it's just not a good source. Don't use it.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of articles they talked about where their argument was basically, this is wrong because everyone and their mother was taught, this is what really happened. Like, that's what I read about in their section about the industrial era, and they were talking about all the corruption and all that, and they said it was there because that's what everyone and their mother was told. And it's like, yeah, well, the way the public schools teach civics is basically the government invented gravity, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no light, no earth, no gravity, only darkness until the government and their almightiness came in.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Probably the dumbest thing ever was when I compared status, to creationists, and how I said that libertarians are the real atheists of the political spectrum, and they're like, no, you guys are like flat earthers because you deny something that is real. And I asked them, well, what do you mean by that? And they're like, you say that governments are bad, but then how come everything has a government? And I'm just like, buddy, that's like saying religion exists because we have the Catholic Church.
Or they do like, you worship the market or something like that. It's like, we want a voluntary society. How is that anything that's really kooky or out of the way?
Yeah.
When people hate on nuclear power because Chernobyl, yeah, when it would be more logical to hate on socialism because Chernobyl.
Yeah. Not to mention Chernobyl isn't the way it is because it's radioactive and it's too dangerous for humans to live. It's because even after the fire cleared and it was largely declared that, with the exception of the direct test site, Pripyat was perfectly safe, the Ukrainian government still wouldn't let people in.
Well, there have been hundreds of people living in the exclusion zone. They were like, no, these are our homes. We're not going to leave. They've been living there this whole time, and they haven't grown a third arm or died of radiation poisoning or anything like that.
Yeah, that's another thing too. It's like when I looked it up, almost everyone who died at Chernobyl, like all 86 of them, not the hundreds of people, said, yeah, they only 86 died, and guess what they died of? Was it radiation poisoning, mutations? No, it was smoke inhalation or burns.
Yep.
Yeah, basically.
And Jo Jorgensen was definitely the better candidate. She just didn't get the press coverage.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, David R. Market worship, that's like calling an atheist a Satanist. Yeah.
Yep.
It reminds me of this one comedian one time, where he talked about how someone accused him of being a Satanist because he was an atheist, and he was like, why would I worship something I don't believe in? Because I don't believe in Satan either.
Mm-hmm. And they'll say, well, really deep down there's a God and you know it and you're just rebelling against him.
Well, no,
I wouldn't say he was awful. He wasn't Bob Barr awful, certainly.
Or that one guy, like, I forgot who he was, but he tried running for the Libertarian candidate, but he was kind of an a-hole because he supported cancel culture and all that,
I don't know who you're talking about.
I forgot his name, but he was forgotten pretty quickly, but that
must have been.
That's another funny thing too, is when people try to say, oh, libertarianism is a gateway to the alt-right, because look at these awful people that ran for the Libertarian Party. It's like, okay, I'll look them up. Okay, oh yeah, this guy who was a big racist ran for the Libertarian Party, and what's this? They kicked him out?
Also, two-word rebuttal, David Duke.
David Duke?
He was that big KKK guy who was a big Democrat. Yeah. Like, who was another one, I think Lyndon LaRouche or someone like that.
But yeah,
the Democrat Party seems full of people with rather unsavory opinions.
Yeah. Funny how that works.
Stupid policies.
Yeah, it's like,
I think Bill Weld, because if you look at Johnson in 2012, he was much better than 2016, and I think it was Bill Weld's influence that made him not so good in 2016.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, that's why I'm not worried about Biden taking office. I'm worried about Harris,
Yeah.
because Biden's old. He's just a stereotypical Democrat. He's not going to do anything on his own. It's Harris I'm worried about, because I have heard that people fail to realize that just because they're not officially in charge and they can't and they officially don't have any political power within the White House, that doesn't mean the vice president is still a weak individual. And there's been many cases of them secretly, like you said, siphoning their ideas to the president, basically.
Yep. Plus, I think we talked about this last time, but what are the chances that is Biden going to be in office for for a shorter period of time than Harrison? Before they have him declared incompetent. And
yeah.
Yes, I remember Duke trying to run for president.
It's pretty funny. I was watching, when I was in high school, I used to watch a lot of those old, because Nick at Night used to air a lot of the old shows from the 90s, and there was one sitcom that was making fun of Ross Perot and the Clinton election and all that, and I think my mom, had some people over, and one person was like, "Hey, I liked Perot. I voted for him."
I think he would have had a chance of winning if he hadn't quit and come back. Because he was really popular there for a while, and then he quit, and everyone got disgusted with him. Then he tried coming back, and he didn't really just have the same.
From what I've read, he was that one libertarian candidate you keep mentioning before I keep forgetting his name.
Which one?
The one that died of ALS.
Oh, Harry Brown.
Yeah, from what I've researched, he was no Harry Brown, but he was still pretty good. He actually was saying that government needs to be held accountable for their spending. When he was talking about how he wanted to run the country like a business, that's what he was talking about. Businesses, when they spend money, they need to be held accountable by other parties for it, especially their investors,
Well, no one was talking about the deficit until Perot came on the scene. And then you had that big push in the 90s to get the deficit down, and yeah, that's why you had that whole surplus fraud. It wasn't actually a surplus, but it was still, the deficit was a lot lower than it had been before or since.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, if I recall,
I would give them credit for that if they hadn't tried to lie and say it was a surplus. It wasn't a surplus, people. Look at the numbers.
If I recall correctly, wasn't Ross Perot, so far the only modern-day independent guy party that actually got some electorals, even though it was very minimal?
I'd have to check. I don't remember if it got any electoral votes or not.
I know he won 19% of the popular vote, which for a third-party party candidate, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah. Yep, Bill Clinton became president without a majority of the popular vote in both 92 and 96.
Yep.
But now all of a sudden that means something now that it's not their guy. Oh yeah, Biden is going to definitely destabilize Syria and the peace in the UAE and Yemen and Iran. I don't see that lasting under Biden.
I want to go to Biden and Harris if they're really for that. I'm going to say, why are you trying to cause a nuclear war? But yeah. I didn't want to cause a nuclear war. We just want to stop Syria. Yeah, but here's the thing. Syria is a Russian ally. If we do something to Syria, Russia's going to get pissed off, I honestly think that's what cost, Hillary the election, was when she said, she wanted to enforce that no-fly zone over Syria, and when the general says, yeah, but that's going to piss off Russia and they're going to respond, and she's like, well, then we'll respond back, and a lot of people are like, oh shit, she really wants to start a war with Russia?
So Rocky the Conqueror asks, Skynet from the Terminator versus the Cybermen from Doctor Who would win? I think the relevant thing there is the Cybermen are actually decentralized. Skynet's just one thing that you have to take down. But the Cybermen, even though they have, a cyber leader and a cyber controller and all that, you take them out, they'll just, put another one up. And I mean, if you have even a tiny little cybermite left and it gets into a human colony, you can have them all converted into Cybermen.
Yeah.
And that's what's so difficult about them. It's just such a decentralized structure.
Yeah.
They are, however, parasitic. They can't create new
Yeah.
Cybermen completely from scratch, whereas Skynet is
Right.
dependent on creating
Yeah.
new robots whenever it wants.
But it's funny. It's funny about Skynet because a lot of people like to say that that if Skynet was destroyed, then he would have won because John Connor wouldn't have been born, and therefore there would have been no war. But here's the thing: when you think about it, in actuality, it's Skynet that gets the raw end of the deal because the thing that people ignore, especially in the first movie, Skynet was losing the war. It was confirmed in the first
Mhm.
Terminator movie with Kyle Reese and kind of sort of at the beginning of Terminator 3 that humanity had won. They destroyed his circuitry. They were starting to reestablish their countries, and they were pushing in, and they were very close to shutting him down permanently. That's why he sent the Terminator back.
Yeah,
It was
that's
a
why
last-
they sent the Terminator back to kill John Connor. It was a last-ditch effort to try and stop the resistance.
But here's the thing. A lot of people said, well, if he didn't send it back, then John Connor never would have been born. It's like, yeah, exactly, but he would have lost.
Mhm.
And not to mention, he wouldn't have been created because he was created from the first Terminator he sent back. That's how he was
Well,
created.
he was created because Reese came back chasing the Terminator, and so yeah, by doing that, they were actually setting up for their own destruction. That was kind of the moral of the first movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Well,
it was
the
like
thing-
because the guy who got sent back after the Terminator fell in love with Sarah Connor and ended up fathering his own best friend.
Yeah, a lot of people. have
Russell
actually put it-
Perez says there should be a bot to make a clickable link. What link are you wanting there, Russell?
Oh, the Discord server, probably.
Anyway, you were saying?
I was about to say, I think that's the reason why a lot of people also hated the third Terminator movie is especially because what they did to Skynet. Because in the first two movies, basically, from what we can gather, Skynet he's not really like this super evil villain. Rather, he's just a computer doing its job. Because I think, if I recall correctly, it was programmed to protect itself at any cost. And because it viewed humanity as a threat, it was just coming to the logical conclusion it was. But Terminator 3 made it almost a sapient-like being that knew what it was doing.
Well,
the
problems happen. The problems they said the first movie. The problem happened when Skynet became self-aware and humanity panicked and tried to pull the plug.
Oh.
Yeah, as far as I know, what happened is Skynet essentially has an overriding directive to protect the United States, and it also perceives any threat to itself as a threat to the United States because its job is to protect the United States, and this is why you shouldn't create a potentially self-aware AI with a single overriding directive.
And don't put all of your, reliance on your defense capabilities and everything in its hands.
Yeah, not to mention that was another error with Terminator 3 was how could Skynet actually launch the missiles? Because now in the original one they actually explained why, and that was because by the time Judgment Day occurred, Skynet had been linked to BMs, but in Terminator 3, Skynet was just a prototype that was just getting ready to get started, so it probably wouldn't have had the same access.
Well, and in Terminator 2, what they had said was that the Skynet couldn't destroy its enemies because it was all in the United States. Skynet couldn't do that himself, but if it launched the missiles against Russia, the Russian counterattack would. And so it was doing a little bit of a shell game there.
Yeah, that's why.
I don't declare anything beyond the second movie valid in my opinion.
Yeah.
The first two movies are really good, but the rest of it's...
Well, judging by what's happening, most of the people involved with Terminator, especially considering how the last couple films turned out, they're like, yeah, you know what, fans, just ignore everything except 1 and 2. 1 and 2 were perfect. Just those are the official canon. Everything else is mistakes.
It's fanfics.
Yeah.
You get the impression that's really all Hollywood is doing these days.
Yeah.
With all these reboots and everything that just aren't as good. They're just people doing fanfic. Really expensive fanfic.
And you want to know why I think they're doing that? It's thanks to those good old copyright laws they fought so hard for. It's like, yeah, they're like, oh, we need extremely strict and tough copyright, otherwise there won't be any creativity because everyone would steal from each other. Now it's 2020. Hey, let's make a movie based off of this. Sorry, we don't own the rights. Well, then we'll buy it. They don't want to sell. Damn it.
Well, I think it's also the problem of they've relied on copyright for so long that they've lost the ability to be creative.
Yeah.
I mean, you can rest on your
Atrophied
laurels and
like a
just keep
muscle.
just keep cranking out another Star Wars movie, as long as people are buying the tickets.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I wanted to say, with the AI thing is one of the reasons I actually quite like the AI from Wargame and the way that was written is it's doing exactly what it was programmed to do. And like at the end of the movie, when spoilers, when it runs through all of the it runs through all of these possible simulations of we strike first, Russians strike first, we strike first, and it's going through every single possible scenario that it can come up with. And thankfully, someone had programmed into it that mutually assured destruction is not a victory scenario, and so it was trying to find a strategy of how do we win the Cold War. Every single one ends in mutually assured destruction, and then it just gives up. It's like, can we play chess?
Well,
it's so much easier.
Because Matthew Broderick had it playing tic-tac-toe against itself, and of course, if both people play tic-tac-toe perfectly, it will always end in a draw. And so he kept drawing at tic-tac-toe and then drawing at global thermonuclear war, and just couldn't find a winning scenario at either one.
Yeah, it's that also kind of reminds me of. It reminds me of the scene from Doctor Strangelove, where the Soviets are talking about how it's like, now listen, this is normally classified, but since this is a dire situation, we'll let you know. Recently, we installed a self-defense program, and we have all these nukes strategically placed in areas of the world where we can. And if anything happens to the Soviet Union, they'll set off, cover the Earth in a layer of ash, and launch a second ice age. So if anyone destroys the Soviet Union, we'll go down with you. It's the perfect preventative measure. And then Dr. Strangelove is like, yeah, but that would only work if you told someone. Why didn't you tell anyone? And they're like, oh, yeah, and right now there's a mad American general ordering a bomber to drop a nuke. Yeah, and then they contact the Soviet premier saying, listen, there's an American guy dropping a nuclear bomb. No matter how tempting it is, if we can't stop him, you can't activate the defense system. And he's like, oh yeah, we made it automatic now.
The short story is really good, David. Although from what I understand, in the game, Harlan Ellison was actually the voice of the AI, reading it out the way he wanted to. We're talking about I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Oh. But yeah, it's just... Yeah, I think that was the whole point of, Dr. Strangelove, was just to show how ridiculous, it's like, we gotta figure out a way to protect ourselves and win this war. Well, how are we gonna win the war? I know, let's invent something that'll blow up the world if we lose. How is that gonna help us win the war? You know what I like to say? You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of a toddler throwing a tantrum. It's like you can't have it because you're abusing it. You're misbehaving. You're going to time out. And he's like, fine. If I can't have the toy, then nobody can have it. And then he breaks it. It's like if I can't rule the world, then nobody else can rule it. I'm gonna blow it up.
But Kubrick followed up Strangelove with 2001, and one of the reasons why people say 2001 is as good as it was is because it wasn't that political, and it was going to be like when you have the Australopithecine throw up the bone, and then it cuts to that little orbiter, and you don't know what that is. That was supposed to be like this orbiting nuclear platform, with the Earth, constantly at this edge of nuclear war. He used the bone as a weapon, and now we're using nukes as a weapon. And Kubrick had just gotten so disgusted with, making all these statements about nuclear war that he just cut all that out of the script. And so you really don't know what it is. It's just a thing up there in space. But that made 2001 a lot less political than it was going to be. And a lot of people say it was a lot better as a result.
All this crazy stuff people do. That's why if I were to ever make a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I'd add my own faction, which is about these scientists who are so obsessed. They're just so obsessed with, discovering science that they actually live on a different world because their old homeworld was destroyed. And they're like, well, why'd you create a weapon? Why'd you create a weapon that would destroy your own planet? And they were like, well, if we didn't create it, then our enemies would have created it. Kind of like
Well, that was sort of what the Golga Frenchums did. Because remember, they got rid of them. They got rid of the middlemen, including all of the telephone sanitizers, because they thought they were useless, and then they could focus on doing science. And then they were all wiped out by a disease from a dirty telephone.
Oh.
Kind of relevant to today's whole concept of essential workers, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony, that's the value of backups.
Yeah.
As long as you have backups.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hear that Pfizer that they just developed a vaccine for COVID. Now, let's place a bet on how long it's going to take for the FDA to approve it. My money's on 15 years. What about you? Yeah. 15 years? That's how long it's going to take to get approved? Oh, no. Oh, sure. Oh, thank goodness. No, that's just what it takes to get through the preliminary. After that, then we got to put it through ethical trials, and that can take even longer. Yeah, I think you mentioned that. It's like almost all of the drugs that reach the FDA, they have been proven through multiple tests to be completely safe. They're just saying, yeah, but did you ethically develop them?
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy rules like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like...
something's just going to have to be done. Why aren't people learning that lesson? If there's one lesson that 2020 taught us, that COVID taught us, it should be don't make an obstructionist, drug approval system.
Yeah. It's like, I agree. It's like sometimes I feel like world governments are run by the Vogons half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like...
Which I love that. I think those are like the greatest villains because they're not actually evil. They're just bureaucrats.
Yeah.
And that's like the worst enemy you can have.
Yeah, throughout the film and the books, if I recall correctly, they're not... they're not being evil because they're being evil. They're just following protocols because they believe, well, if you don't have protocols, how anything's going to work,
Wouldn't lift a finger to save their own grandmother, except with form, sign-in, triplicate, lost, found, lost again.
But if the form says blow up a planet with billions of people on it, hey, that's what you do, because that's what the form says.
Yeah, and then when they get there and they see all the people are panicking and some nations are trying desperately to reason or try to fight them, they're like, "What are you complaining about? It was in the Alpha Centauri system development plan. Why
in the planning office, you could have dropped by there anytime. It's only 4 light years away.
Yeah.
Take more of an interest in local affairs. Jeez.
Yeah. To which, that's another thing, too, that I like to say is, people, and I think this is that probably was the joke, is that everyone was like, dolphins were smart enough to know, the Vogons were coming, but you know what I say? I think the dolphins weren't as smart as they thought, because if they are truly the smartest things in the world, how did they not realize that humans weren't understanding what they were saying and switch to a different method of communication?
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom.
Yeah.
That's true.
Then again, I think that was the joke in the book and even the movie is that, yes, dolphins and the mice and all the others, they're intelligent, but they lack wisdom, which is why they do all that stupid, goofy stuff,
Yeah. The mice don't have any wisdom at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I don't know if it was in the book, but I like how in the movie it was later revealed that the president approved the destruction of Earth, even though it would kill millions of people, it ultimately contribute nothing to the grand scheme of things. And when that one girl asked him why he did it, he was basically like, "Oh, I just thought it was. He didn't even read
well,
it."
in the movie, he thought he was signing his autograph.
Yeah,
and he didn't realize it was a form. It was 11 Kisses Zaphod. In the books and in the radio series, what it was he had his memory wiped but when he ran for president, because no one could know the real reason why he ran for president.
Oh.
Because they screen your brain when you get the job, and if they found that he was a subversive, they would have executed him. And so a lot of that is about trying to figure out actually what's going on, how is it tied in with the Vogons and the destruction of Earth, and what's really going on.
And if I recall correctly, in the sequel book, wasn't it later explained that Earth was destroyed in a conspiracy because some scientists were afraid that were afraid that if people found out the ultimate question of the universe, there'd be no more questions to ask, so they wanted to destroy...
Well, no, it was the psychiatrists.
Oh.
Because if everyone understood what was going on, everyone would be, everyone would be mentally okay, and then the psychiatrists would be out of a job.
Oh.
And so they worked with the Vogons to try and con the president into destroying the Earth. And
yeah.
So some of the extra books, like Young Zaphod Plays It Safe and stuff like that, kind of go into that.
Also, one thing, if I recall correctly, in the book is Earth doesn't really get rebuilt, if I recall correctly. Like I mean,
well, it sort of does in So Long and Thanks for All the Fish.
Yeah. But in all honesty, that's one thing I like about the movie, is the ending is when they rebuild, is when they literally remake everything and literally bring back all the dead people from Earth, including their memories, and everyone has this look like, what just happened? And then they just go back to their normal lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, what happened? Oh, whatever.
Grambo, right now we're talking about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, yeah. But we switch topics all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anonymous, I've always loved root beer, but I really thought that was a good lesson about how government goes about doing things and making something illegal, even though...
Yeah. Well, in all honesty, Shane, I'm still going to say this. The fact that saffron is banned, but not alcohol, is only further proof that humanity as a species as a whole is a functioning alcoholic.
Well, you see, alcohol is the main ingredient. Saffron isn't. Saffron is an additive. So that makes it completely different. Yeah, I know, it's dumb.
Yeah, I think it's just a person trying to monitor their drinking. Like there's no denying, if we were to humanize all of humanity and all the other species, they'd be like, humanity, listen, you're smart, you're wise, but you gotta stop the drinking. It's holding you back. And humanity's like, hey, I can quit anytime I want to. I just choose not to right now. Okay, then stop drinking. Not right now. I just wanna... Hey, don't touch my whiskey! Yeah. I mean, hey, it's your body. You can have the right to put whatever you want in it, but still,
I don't think they interbred, David. I think they displaced them. I think that's the idea. We're actually the descendants of the Gulga Frenchums and not the actual humans, which messed up the whole experiment. The least bad president of my lifetime. Well, I guess let's go through them. I guess I was born in the Johnson administration. He was terrible. Nixon, he was terrible. Carter, at least he didn't have like 1,000 Middle East wars going on.
Yeah.
Reagan, overrated, but not too bad.
Yeah.
George H.W. Bush, nah. Bill Clinton, only really because he had a Republican Congress moderating him.
Yeah.
George W. Bush, nah. Obama, nah. Trump, nah. Yeah.
I saw a joke like that one time that says the reason why Bill Clinton was the best president ever was because Congress wouldn't let him be the president.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still can't believe he signed Megan's Law into law, yet knowing his behavior.
Yep. Confession through projection.
Yeah. That's why.
All right, see you, Anonymous.
That's why if time travel is ever invented, I really want to go back in time and just publicly announce that the moment he signs Megan's Law, reveal, show the pictures of all the dirty stuff he did with his secretaries, and watch how everyone's like, wait a minute, we're trying to protect children from a guy who has molested and assaulted women.
I don't understand what this Great Reset thing is supposed to be all about.
I don't know either. I think it's just a meme like the Boogaloo. Speaking of which, out of curiosity, I was looking up on Wikipedia about the Boogaloo movement, and it's pretty funny because, Wikipedia is infamously becoming more and more biased towards left-wing causes, and they were trying so hard to associate with the right wing, and yet even the editors were full of, they're like, it's like, listen, guys, I know we don't like the Boogaloo people, but we can't call them racist, right-wing extremists, because they're not racist for the most part. They're just anti-government.
See, Rainbow, I don't understand this argument, because all they're saying is if you're using our code, you can't do the unethical things that we're against. How is it unethical to say you can't do anything unethical with our code?
Yeah. Yeah, the Great Reset, that ain't gonna happen.
Most of what I've heard is
even then people are like, well, the Great Reset will fix the thing. No, it's not just gonna means things are gonna go back to the beginning. Are you sure you can actually fix it? You know.
What I've heard of the Great Reset is just a plan by politicians and bureaucrats to implement communism through the restrictions they've managed to get in through the coronavirus. And yeah, it sounds like a crackpot conspiracy theory, but when, you know, the Prime Minister of Canada uses the exact words, the Great Reset, there might actually be something to this. Hang on.
Yeah, just like when George H.W. Bush kept talking about the New World Order.
Yeah, David R. about Hitler reminds me of, you mentioned about Hitler. It reminds me of this funny joke I saw one time where a guy goes back in time, he successfully assassinates Hitler and goes back, you know, to show just how better a world without Hitler is, and he's shocked to discover that Nazi Germany controls most of Europe and Russia, and then he looks in the history books and found out that by killing Hitler, someone more competent took over the Nazi party, and they didn't make all the mistakes Hitler did, and they were actually able to conquer and win World War II.
Yeah, because Hitler was crazy.
Yeah, fun fact, alternate history people and all that. Guess what? There were plenty of opportunities the Allies had to assassinate Hitler, and the British tried to kill him many times, and there were perfect opportunities to do so that easily could have been executed. And you know who stopped them? It was the United States, because they told the British, look, Hitler is a crazy guy. He is doing far more to destroy Germany than anything we can do. You know, if we take him
if they kill him and someone like, you know, Himmler or Goebbels or someone like that, you know, gets into power, then yeah, they're screwed.
Well, Goebbels probably not a good person because he was just a propaganda minister. But yeah, you know, if Goering or Himmler or various others got into power, many of them who actually had legitimate military experience, World War II would have been slightly different.
Yeah, I meant Goering, not Goebbels.
Yeah.
What's with all those people having similar names? Goering, Goebbels, Hitler, Himmler.
Yeah.
It's not a very well written book. The villains are terrible. No villains are like that. They're all cardboard cutouts, and get more creative with the names.
What if the U.S. joined the Central Powers in World War II? You know, I actually thought of an interesting idea about what happened if the U.S. joined the Central Powers, and even though there was a bias against Germany, there actually is one way the U.S. could have joined the Central Powers, and that was is not about the Zimmerman telegraph, but if the U.S. discovered that the British were literally manipulating their information and their telegrams to make Germany look like a villain, because that's literally the only reason why people hated Germany, was because they're saying, oh yeah, the Germans, they're raping women, they're kicking puppies, they're shooting babies, they're taking everything, and they're like, oh, well, who's telling you this? The British Empire.
Yeah, it never made any sense to me because the Germans didn't even start the war.
Yeah.
It was Austria. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Austria started the conflict, but Russia is what made it became a world war.
Yeah.
Because if Russia had stayed out, it would have just been a border skirmish between Serbia and Austria. But because Russia declared war on Austria, Germany said, "I'm sorry, we have no choice but to declare war on you." And France is like, "Hey, you can't declare war on Russia. We're declaring war on you."
Yeah.
And then Germany goes through, you know. I actually made a joke like that one time when I heard about, you know, those terrorist attacks in Austria, and I was like, oh no, now Austria's gonna declare war on Syria for ISIS, and then Russia's gonna declare war on Austria, Germany's gonna declare war on Russia in defense of Austria, France is gonna declare war on Germany in defense of Russia, so Germany's gonna have to go through Belgium to get to France, which is gonna piss off Britain. Wait a minute, this sounds familiar. Though, to be fair, when you actually look at historical context, all the European powers are looking forward to a war with each other. They just needed an excuse, you know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a stupid reason for a war, you know, the execution of Ferdinand.
Yeah. And it's
But
like,
that
and
wasn't
it's like,
really the cause of the war. It was all the tensions that were
oh yeah,
creating
I mean,
the...
yeah. Fun fact: when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, hardly anyone gave a damn. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He barely made it into the papers. You know, contrary to what some movies portrayed, it wasn't like it was on the frontline page of everything saying Austria, Franz Ferdinand's dead. Everyone's going to war. No, originally people didn't really care. You know, in fact, the general attitude was, it's like, well, what did he expect? He went to an area that's full of violence and political strife. What was he thinking going there?
Well, even then, he wouldn't have died if his doctors had been able to get to his wounds, because apparently a bespoke suit wasn't enough for him. He had to be actually sewn into it. I wouldn't mind trying a bespoke suit at one point. Apparently, they're really comfortable and they help your posture and stuff like that, but it's expensive to do.
Yes, I know who King Leopold is, and it's funny how people use him as proof as atrocities committed by capitalism, and I'm like, how is a country that's quote-unquote owned by the king?
I'll be right back. I need to take care of my dog for a second.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what happened in Belgium under King Leopold was because he was the king and he controlled it, you know? Yeah. Then again, that's what a lot of people do. It's like they blame it on they blame, an imperial law on capitalism. Yeah, so what are you doing, Pip?
Nothing much.
Yeah. Watching the pink parrot go wee. I don't know why I can't stop watching that video. It's hilarious. Yeah, yeah, you're right, Pip. Some of those parrots, they are just crazy. I don't know. I've got enough worry. I don't know, Grandma. I've got enough worried on my own. Yeah. Now, so Shane left. That means I'm in charge of the live stream. Now I know how Starscream felt. Yeah.
Comes back, just slaps you down. No, this is my live stream.
Yeah, I think there was an episode like that where Megatron got sick and Starscream took over the Decepticons for like 5 minutes, but then Megatron got better and more or less smacked him in the back of the head and said, "Get back to your place, Starscream." Also in the movie, he briefly became the king of the Decepticons for 5 minutes, but then Megatron showed up, upgraded to Galvatron, and he basically vaporizes him. Yeah, fun facts, Pipsqueak. Did you know that in that movie, Unicron was voiced by Orson Welles?
Not really, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it was his very Yeah, you missed it. You missed it, Shane. I jokingly said, "Wow, Shane's gone. That means I'm in charge." Oh, now I know how Starscream felt from Transformers. You're probably too old for. Yeah. Yeah, and then the king would grab them and kick them out the door, but it would cut away and he was flying out the door and he's like, "What just happened?"
I'm gonna put.
Yeah, reboot. Yeah. Oh, a white chihuahua. Yeah. Shane, you're muted.
I forgot to unmute it when I came back when I sat down again.
That's what people are saying, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I turned the webcam back on, but I didn't turn the mic back on. And I see your puppy dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see your puppy dog. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, reboot. Yeah. Oh,
I forgot to unmute it when I came back when I sat down again.
Yeah, that's what people are saying, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I turned the webcam back on, but I didn't turn the mic back on. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Ew, it's a
As I
chihuahua.
was saying when I was muted, I had him before I met Heather, but basically the first time she came over, he immediately latched onto her and became her favorite person. So he doesn't always do so well when she works late like this.
No. Oh, why does he turn
So
into do they turn into a whimperer?
Well, I mean, he just kind of mopes until she gets back, and sometimes the girls will look after her, and I'm not sure what. I think the girls are gaming right now.
Any thoughts on anarcho-monarchism? Yeah, the same thing as libertarian socialism. It's an oxymoron.
Yeah, ask him. There's always a delay in the chat. It seems to be at least 30 seconds or so.
Yeah. Actually, by the way, Shane, going back to Animaniacs, there's one episode that kind of irks me just because I'm kind of obsessed with historical accuracy, but it was the one where they were doing on Michelangelo. Like, why is Michelangelo just like an ancient Roman guy? He was actually a Renaissance artist in the 1500s, and he had
because they're
beard.
being silly.
Yeah.
Well, why did he talk like this?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they were trying to imitate someone or...
There was an interview with them, and they actually asked them, like, why did they make Michelangelo look like that? Because he looked like Tony Curtis, and he looked nothing like, the real life. And they said that originally they were going to try to make him accurately, but then someone said that he looked like Kirk Douglas, so they changed him, and they modeled him after Kirk Douglas.
Oh, that must have been it, what they were trying to do with the voice, Kirk Douglas.
Yeah, they were trying to model him after Kirk Douglas.
But they got most of it right, like him, getting PO'd and firing all of his artists.
Yeah.
All the painters that were working on it, so he had to do it himself.
What's the most impressive thing about the Sistine Chapel is that a lot of people forget Michelangelo was not a painter; he was a sculptor.
No,
now, he had training in painting and he knew how to paint, but that wasn't his forte. And he
hated doing it. He only took it on because he was promised by the Pope that if he did that the Pope would let him do a series of sculptures.
Yeah, that, and they were paying him a crap ton of money. And according to the city records, and according to the diaries of one of the bishops that was monitoring him, he would come, every day when his shift was over, he would come down just covered in paint, cough up and scarf down a bunch of water, and say, "I told you, I'm not a painter." So. And yet he still did a good job.
I don't expect them to do much of Biden and Kamala just because they read it like a year ago, and they've been animating all this time. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully they'll do the mockery of everyone like they did before.
I know.
Tiny Toons, I think, set the stage for Animaniacs, and Animaniacs set the stage for Freakazoid. So I'll have to pick Freakazoid over.
Yeah. Well, actually, if I recall correctly, Freakazoid started out as a spinoff of Animaniacs, and he would often appear in there. And fun fact...
Oh, yeah, well, it was part of the same, like, cartoon universe type of thing, and they'd each appear in each other's episodes. Yeah. It was the same team of people doing it.
Yeah, and according to an interview with Paul Rugg, who was behind Freakazoid, Steven Spielberg loved Freakazoid and even sent them a memo, which he had hang up, and they actually put that in an episode where all the characters are having an argument over who Steven Spielberg likes, and Freakazoid's like, "I believe we are liked by Steven Spielberg the most. We have a memo."
Yeah. Paul Rugg was actually the voice of Freakazoid.
Yeah.
And he originally just did it as a scratch track.
Yeah.
And no one else could do the Freakazoid voice as well as he did, so he ended up doing it. And
yeah.
He didn't like it because he's not a voice artist, and it just took him take after take to be able to do it. But
yeah, and according to an interview with Paul Rugg, his idea for Mr. Director, the reason why he sounded like that is because he was trying to imitate what was his name?
Terry Lewis, the vibe,
Terry
nice
Lewis,
lady.
Yeah. I did see a little bit about the original Jerry Lewis Nutty Professor, and one scene that just has me cracking up all the time is when he's on that date, and he's suave and all that. He's like, and you know what else? I really think you're an interesting, because he's reverting back, and he just looks and he's just like, he just jumps away and runs off. Like, yeah, he just like, yeah. Yep. I also once saw one funny joke that said that jokingly says that it is one known fact about French people: they hate every single American who has ever existed except Jerry Lewis.
Well, Grandpa, they've got Tress MacNeille back as the voice of Dot, and she did Slappy, so they could do Slappy.
Yeah.
And my dog just sneezed on me.
I had a funny idea for an Animaniacs character when I was younger. He was called Benny, and he was a fox, and he was the husband of Slappy. And the reason why he didn't appear was he was in an asylum for a little bit because he's a Vietnam veteran, which is why he's no longer an actor. Yeah. Skippy tells him, Uncle Benny, how come you're not a cartoon character? Then it's like, well, I was a cartoon character for a while. What happened? Vietnam happened because he got drafted, and when he got back, he wasn't the same. And actually, one joke I really have is that he has a real hatred for the Disney Robin Hood movie because he auditioned for the role, and that was going to save his acting career, but it went to, as he quote, that British fruitcake, referring to the actor who ultimately got the role.
I wonder if they could get Bernadette Peters back and do Rita and Runt.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised they got an actual famous opera singer to do Rita. I mean, because the Nostalgia Critic interviewed the cast, and they asked, like, how did you get her to do the role? And it's like, well, the good news about being BFFs with Steven Spielberg is he knows people.
Yep.
Yeah, and they originally were afraid, because they were like, well, what are we gonna, because she might even say no, but apparently she was like, oh yeah, I'd love to do it. She was like, I'd love to do the role.
Yeah, it was one of the Ruger kids who was Skippy, so I don't know how their voices have changed now.
Yeah, fun fact, the Ruger kid who voiced Skippy, he also voiced Baby Plucky and all that.
Yep.
And they asked him, like, that famous water go down the hole, what was that all about? He's like, basically I was my job in that one was to make fun of my baby brother, because that's what my dad based that episode about. It was after, because my brother was still like only a toddler, so he could barely speak and he was still learning, and he would do all crazy stuff like if he saw the toilet flush, he'd go, "Why'd it go down the hole?" and stuff like that. Yeah, so
that was Nathan Ruger, and I don't remember what his brother's name was, but I think it was his brother who was the Flame, wasn't it? I was thinking that was the other Ruger.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, he said, basically my job when I first got into voice acting was to make fun of my baby brother. Yeah.
But maybe if they like upped it a semitone, he could still do it or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with today's editoring, they could just kind of sort of do a chipmunk thing with him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said, up at a semitone.
Yeah.
Not quite a chipmunk, because the chipmunks, and the singing chipmunks were always an octave higher, half speed, because that made it easier for Dave Seville to sing it. Ross Bagdasarian was his real name, but when he did the speaking ones, he actually varied their voices. Like, I think Theodore was a bit slower than Alvin was and all that, so he actually varied them. And he also knew, because I did a lot of research on this when I did my parody of it for Status Christmas Carols. He figured out all of this, including the fact that he had to speak more slowly. And that was something that Disney never did with those two. Oh God, what were those little two? They weren't chipmunks. What were they? With the high squeaky voices. Chip and Dale. First of all, they had women voicing the characters, and women's voices do not chipmunkize that very well. When you speed them up like that, they just get really squeaky and hard to understand. And also, they were saying the lines at normal speed, which means that when you double the speed on it, because back then you couldn't change speed or pitch independently, you can't do that in analog. It just meant their lines were going by so fast that no one could understand them.
Yeah. Going back to my character, Benny the Fox. Another joke that would have happened is that a common joke is that he and Slappy are kind of like the stereotypical couple on like those old 50s and 60s shows where they were constantly fighting and bickering, but they still loved each other and would go to bed with each other at the end of the evening. Yeah.
The Hip Hippos weren't bad. They were just only good for one joke.
Yeah.
You know, the
to
rest
play
of them
the
were the same.
obnoxious to play the obnoxious tourists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just not realizing what, how they were really looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was what Freakazoid neatly avoided with things like the Huntsman, how he never actually got to fight any crime because it was always a slow period, and someone would just be playing around with the horn of urgency, and he'd come all excited thinking there was something. The RICO Act had to do with the sharp rise in the prison population. I think that's probably the war on drugs.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and sorry if I'm sounding narcissistic because I like talking about my characters a lot, but that was another thing about Benny is that he was a patriot, but he still, didn't like the government. He jokingly jokingly tells Skippy, it's like, oh no, I'm a proud American citizen and I love my country and all that she stands for. It's those idiots in the White House and Congress I hate.
But it's like you were talking about couples in the 60s. The one exception to that was Gomez and Morticia Adams. There was no real dysfunction or disagreement between them, and they thoroughly loved each other. And they could really do that because they were weird.
Yeah.
And that's what the weird people can do. So be weird.
And actually, one funny joke I was going to make is because, Slappy's a squirrel and Benny was a fox, obviously. And he jokingly tells Skippy, like during a Valentine's Day thing, is that their marriage was actually very controversial because back in those days, carnivores and herbivores were not allowed to marry each other. Which kind of, when you think about it, that's kind of like, the controversy that happened in the 60s and 70s when there was an increase of interracial marriages,
Yeah.
Yeah, fun fact, despite what...
that wasn't legalized until like the 50s or something, was it?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, white people were also persecuted under Jim Crow laws. In fact, one very famous but overlooked case was that one white guy that fell in love and married a black woman, and he got arrested because you can't do that.
Yep, they were the most stable nuclear family on television. God love the audiences. Yeah. Which they could be because they were weird.
Yeah.
It was their weirdness that allowed them to...
But then the movies got made and they turned them from weird to like a nihilistic family. It's like...
Well, the first movie was good. They did a really good job with that first one.
Yeah.
I don't even know what was up with that second one, especially with the Fester sub-story on that one, and then I didn't watch any of the others.
Not to mention, I'm sorry, but look, Addams Family, I know you like to be weird and morbid and all that, but you need to take Tuesday to, or whatever her name is, to
Wednesday.
Wednesday to a therapist or something, because there's a huge difference between being into the macabre and being a flat-out psychopath.
Well, see, in the series and even in the first movie, she really wasn't a psychopath.
Yeah.
It's not like, they would be horrified when someone died. It just didn't quite mean the same thing for them because, you could, cut off their arms and then they're fine in the next scene. But...
Yeah. I kind of wanted to do something like that with Benny the Fox, where the joke is that he's not hurt by all the... Like, for instance, they're talking about Bumby and Old Yeller and all that, and the joke is that during the scenes, everyone's crying and he's laughing, and the reason is because he was in Vietnam,
Well, that was something else about the second movie, though. When Wednesday was trying to kill the baby and they thought there was something wrong, I'm like, that's part of the normal goings-on in the Addams family. How many times did Pugsley and Wednesday kill each other? That just means they accepted the baby. So I don't know. In that second movie, someone didn't understand something about.
Well, that's another thing too. I hear is that people didn't like Christina Ricci as Tuesday because it's like, if I recall correctly, in the original series, yes, she was morbid like her, like her family, but she still had like a girly, personality to her. So when she was doing all this messed up stuff, she was doing it with a childlike curiosity. Whereas Christina Ricci just played her like a cold, heartless serial killer, which a lot of people say that's not how she was like. You know, the comedy was that, you know, she did all that stuff, but she did it with a childlike curiosity, you know.
Like I said, the first movie was a lot better about that. The first movie they had done a really good job of, and then the ones after that. Well, and then Raul Julia died, and
yeah.
I mean, but between him and John Aston, you've got the ways you can play Gomez, and who's gonna do Gomez after that?
Yeah, Raul Julia. You know, I'll always remember him for playing M. Bison in that Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter movie.
I'll always remember him from Overdrawn in the Memory Bank.
That, well,
did you see that?
Yeah,
the one they did on MST3K that was like a PBS production or something, a local PBS station.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny about him playing M. Bison in Street Fighter, because that's universally accepted as not being a good movie, and they, you know, that was the very last movie he did. In fact, he actually was making that movie while he was in the hospital because he was very sick. And according to an interview with his family after it was there, it's like, why did him, such a famous and respected actor, why'd he take something like that? And they said he took it because his kids were big gamers and they loved, you know, the Street Fighter games, so he did it for them, you know. And, you know, even though it's not a good movie, you know, you still got to give it a determination, because if I recall correctly, near the end of filming, he was literally in the hospital, barely hanging in there, and he was still getting up and doing acting. You know, he was still getting up to do it.
Now, that sure was a movie that existed, yeah, unlike the Matrix sequels. They never existed. I don't know what was up with those.
Yeah, Raul Julia Bison, a.k.a. the guy that's famous for going, of course!
I really hated myself for thinking this one time, but I was watching Adam Savage's YouTube channel, and he was talking about, when I did this like on the Star Wars prequel movies, and then he mentioned something else about being on the Matrix sequels, and I'm like, gee, did he work on any good movies? And I hated myself for thinking that, because I love Adam Savage, but he was just listing a lot of bad movies.
To be fair, for him, it was just work, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing special effects, and the special effects on those were really good.
Yeah.
He didn't have anything to do with the writing or anything.
In all honesty, looking back at The Matrix, that's the only thing that a lot of people really remember about it. It's like you ask them, it's like, so you like The Matrix and all that? Yeah. Oh, what do you like about it? Oh, I love that action scene, and the scene where those semis crash into each other, and those agent and that lady were dueling, you know, as they were falling off the building, you know, and all that. It's like, oh, well, who was your favorite character and why? It's like, what was the name of the black bald guy?
No, they remember that. So I remember all of the philosophical discussions after the first one about, like, you know, how would you know you really are in the Matrix, and are we in the Matrix, and things like that, and how do you know the things you know? Yes, David, it is a pity they never made the sequel to The Matrix. I'm sure that would have been good.
From what I heard, the first one was really good, and it really did have, and not only was it good action-wise, it was also really good, you know, story-wise, but then the other two sequels just got lost.
Yeah, I don't know what really happened with those.
Funny thing,
and I mean, it's not like the Wachowskis can't, you know, tell a good story, because, you know, they followed it up with their adaptation of V for Vendetta, now, which wasn't exactly true to the comic, but it was still really good.
By the way, people, V for Vendetta, V doesn't wear a Guy Fawkes mask because Guy Fawkes was an anarchist who fought for the people. There's actually a funny story. Alan Moore was asked, you know, why did you pick Guy Fawkes? Because he was not an anarchist, and if anything, he was actually worse than the government he was trying to overthrow. And apparently Alan Moore said the decision to make him wear a Guy Fawkes mask came from one of my cartoonists, because he said the reason why Guy Fawkes should be the symbol of V is because Guy Fawkes was the only person who entered British Parliament with honest intentions.
Yeah, that's an old saying about Guy Fawkes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the whole blowing up the Houses of Parliament thing.
Yeah. And actually, one thing I've heard that he criticized that surprises a lot of people that he criticized about the movie was that V was portrayed as a little bit too positive in the movie, like he was a good guy, even if you just even if you disagreed with his methods. Whereas if I recall correctly, in the original novel, it's kind of a little murky because on one hand, yes, the Norse Fire Party is full of fascists, but V himself, arguably isn't even better because he's more than willing to kill innocent people if it means advancing his goal.
Well, and I mean, if you look at that initial broadcast in the movie, it was all about, join with me. If you don't see what I do, then by all means let the 5th of November pass unobserved. But if you agree with it, et cetera, and he's trying to inspire them and rise them up. In the comic, it's really like he's sentencing them and really putting them down. Like, you sat behind, you allowed this to happen, you're as guilty as they are.
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed.
Although and I get why this wouldn't work in a movie, but that little self-conversation he had in the comic with Lady Justice on top of the Old Bailey.
Yeah.
That was an amazing scene.
It's pretty weird about Alan Moore because it's like he's one of those people where he can see all the things that are wrong with the world, but he always comes to the wrong conclusion, because he said he's a leftist, he supports socialism and all that, and it's like.
And he doesn't realize that socialism is exactly what caused things like, the V for Vendetta situation or Watchmen or things like that.
Yeah. Not to mention he said that he created V for Vendetta as a response to Margaret Thatcher, and I'm like, why? What did Margaret Thatcher do? She took away, she was no libertarian, but she was, the reason why Margaret Thatcher is so hated, according to a lot of older British people I talked to, is because she actually legitimately took away power from people who had way too much of it.
Yeah. And because she got elected after and largely as a result of the Winter of Discontent, where the Labor government had just absolutely destroyed relationships with the workers and they were striking right and left, and Thatcher actually improved things in that regard. So, I don't know. But I've even heard people blame Thatcher for the Winter of Discontent. I'm like, what are you talking about? She wasn't the prime minister then.
Yeah.
So people remember what they want to remember.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of the critiques I saw, from British people, especially at the time, was that, and this was kind of the same thing over here, the 80s were very much a decade of materialism and having big, flashy possessions and making a big show of things, and where's the substance underneath that? And I can see their point with that one.
Yeah, but in all honesty, I still hate people that are like that. Or they hate consumerism and all that. It's like, why? We're all consumerists and all that.
Yeah, how do you live without being a consumer?
Yeah, that's my problem with the anti-consumerist type of people, because it's like, listen, it's like, you may disagree with how someone spends their money, but if it's their money and they earned it legitimately, who cares if they're buying all this fancy stuff,
Well, and the thing is because the socialists say, well, we're for the workers, and the Republicans say, well, we're for the business. We need to be for the business. And each one of those is a class, because not everyone is a worker, not everyone is a business owner, but everyone is a consumer.
Yeah.
So, if you have that's what a free market policy does. The free market empowers the consumer, which is why it has so many enemies. But
reminds me of this one political cartoon I saw a long time ago, which shows two sides arguing. One's labeled business, one is labeled worker, and they're all yelling and arguing over who's to blame and all this. And in the background, there's a bunch of people called the consumers, and they're like, hey, don't we get a say in all this? And both the worker and the business turn around and say, no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, But yeah, that was one cool thing about Margaret Thatcher, and what's unusual is because they talk about consumerism and all that. It's like, well, Margaret Thatcher wasn't even that either. She was famous for being very frugal,
Mm-hmm.
If I recall correctly,
but it's just people associate them with the decade, and that's kind of what was going on, because you had just come out of the 70s and the recession, and they had finally ended all of the price controls and everything else, and people could actually afford to buy stuff.
Yeah. I just saw a joke like that one time where that's the reason why there's so many negative and anti-capitalistic movies that were made in the 1980s, and it was because they were created by all these hippie directors that were Angus and Jelly that their movement didn't take off, and they were proven wrong, and they missed complaining about stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, They Live is a good movie, but it kind of hurts when you learn the history behind it, you know. And John Carpenter was like, "Oh no, it's an anti-consumerist movie, and there's all these aliens and all that." It's like, yeah, I'm just like
Yeah, it
Carpenter.
really didn't make any sense. Why would aliens pick that particular tactic?
Yeah, you know. And fun fact, apparently it's based on a short story, and in the short story, it's kind of vague and it's never implied, and it is implied in a couple areas because the short story is only 6 pages long, and it's implied that and it is implied that maybe the whole thing, the whole alien conspiracy, is just going on in the main character's mind, because it's established in the first page that he wasn't clear in the mind to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also read an interesting review theory from one person who read the book that said, because the book is called 8 o'clock in the morning, it's about a guy who's told by some alien force that he's going to die of a heart attack at 8 o'clock in the morning. And there's a theory that says he actually literally died at 8 o'clock in the morning, and all the events of the short story was just him, going through, that little, phase that your brain goes through when it's under massive trauma that a lot of people report.
So here's a question. If your Chihuahua is white, how do you tell when he starts going gray? Because he's a rescue, so we really don't know, but we got him 8 years ago. We think he was about 2 when we got him, so he should be starting to get up there. We take care of him, though. Chihuahuas, a lot of times can live 18 years or more. So
yeah. Well, they are smaller dogs, and smaller to medium-sized dogs tend to live a little bit longer than the bigger dogs.
Not always. Pugs will live like 8 years because of the way they're breeding, because people wanted that, head with the short snout and the bulgy eyes and everything, and that creates a lot of health problems.
I don't know if it's true or not, but I actually read somewhere that dogs actually, a long time ago, they used to live pretty long lives, and it wasn't unheard for dogs to live to be like 18 and even in their 20s. And the reason why they get the reputation of only living 10 to 15 years is because of all the breeding we did to them. We basically... Yeah, and that's actually why cats tend to live longer than dogs, is because cats, they tend to come from a variety of stuff, and most cat breeds are mutts, basically.
Oh, you just missed it, Back Alley. We had the revolution. It happened without you. What's going on? What's going on is my dog is moping. That's what's going on. My dog is depressed. He'll be fine when Heather gets home. He'll be energetic and trying to jump on her and everything.
Yeah.
It's so cute when a Chihuahua tries to jump on you and he barely makes it to your knee.
Yeah. I hope you know today, Daddy, I'm feeling very depressed.
Yeah, I should have named him Marvin.
Yeah, well, maybe I got something that you can do that'll take it off your mind. It won't work. I have an exceptionally large mind.
He's either that or he's Buster Keaton, because he does the pratfalls all the time. Like if he's he has this little stuffed bear he likes to play with.
Yeah.
And when he's playing with it, he's not really paying attention to what he's doing, and he'll slide and fall off the bed and things like that.
Yeah.
Or he'll try to jump up somewhere and fall, and he's always fine. He just gets right up and does it again. So it's like Buster Keaton.
Yeah. Here I am, the brain the size of an entire galaxy.
Brain the size of a planet.
Of an entire galaxy, and I have to take you
of
to
a planet.
Do you call that job satisfaction? Because I don't.
I'm a personality prototype. You can tell, can't you?
Yeah.
Thank you, the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation.
Yeah. Yeah. I still love that scene from the movie, like when they're having a malfunction. It's like, Marvin, what can we do? I've been talking to the ship's computer, and it hates me. It hates me.
When I was young, my only friend I had was a pet rat. One morning, it crawled into a cavity in my left foot and died. I have the horrible feeling it's still there.
Yeah.
His life story, yes. You put on a recording of Marvin's life story to someone, and it's all over for them.
Yeah.
I think that was the second radio series.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if I recall correctly, while it wasn't in the book, that whole "I've been talking to the ship's computer and it hates me." If I recall correctly, that was based on a line that happened later in the chapter where he said, "I've been talking to the computer about my takes on the galaxy. It committed suicide."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love the
Oh,
fact
and that
every
whole
single-
conversation with the Frog Star robot.
I still like the ending to Hitchhiker in the Galaxy where Marvin saves the day, because that was just so funny. Yeah.
I love the fact that every single version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is different, and it's different deliberately.
That was.
But
the
it's
whole
also
point.
the same. That's
Yeah.
the great thing about it.
Well, and that was kind of the point too. Actually, a lot of people like to hate on the movie. Because it's like, oh, it's missing this, it's missing that. But it's like, look, Douglas Adams not only was okay with changes based on what medium he translated to, he actually encouraged it.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly his script. Kerry Kilpatrick had to kind of finish it up, and so he got a co-writer. But like people are running like, well, why did Kerry Kilpatrick add in all that stuff with Huma Kavula? And it's like, no, that was Douglas.
Yeah.
Douglas had written all of that and added that in.
Yeah.
He was just trying to take things in a different direction to give people something new.
And I've actually heard that Adam Douglas's biggest pet peeve when it came to his books was people taking them seriously or insisting that if you're gonna make it has to be loyal. Because if I recall correctly, he made that books to kind of mock the sci-fi community.
Well, then the books have a lot of changes from the radio series, so I mean it was never the same. And then the TV series, the miniseries they made in 1980, that has a lot of differences in it too.
Yeah,
I can't remember if it was a throwaway line in the radio series or the movie, but there's a line which is like, it's sort of like people were like pondering what would happen if you actually answer the ultimate questions. Like one of the things that people think could happen is the universe could self-destruct and be replaced by something that makes even less sense.
No, the way it goes is the way it goes is
that's actually true, and that's why every version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is slightly different.
The way it goes is there's a theory that if anyone ever does understand what's going on in the universe, that it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarrely inexplicable. There is another theory which states that this has already happened.
I do like in the radio.
And then there's a third theory. And then there's a third theory that says that the first two theories were created by editors of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to boost sales of the guide.
Yeah.
I do like that when they finally find like the ultimate questions, like the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. It's like what's the question of life, the universe, and everything? 6 times 9. I always knew that there was something fundamentally wrong about the universe.
You know what I like? You know what? I know Douglas Adams wasn't, into the whole interpretation thing, but in my personal opinion, I think the whole joke about that was, because people are always talking about what's the point of living, what's the meaning of life. Well, the truth is, the universe has no objective meaning. It's literally just a seemingly endless mass of chemical reactions and particles and matter floating around. What the meaning of
which
life
is pretty much his point.
Yeah. What the meaning of life in the universe is all entirely up to you and how you interpret it. That's why nihilists are completely wrong. That's one thing I hated about Watchmen is Dr. Manhattan. Then again, from what I heard, Alan Moore didn't like that movie either because they made Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias look like like the understandable bad guys, like they made it. It's like, well, yeah, what they're doing is wrong, but in the grand scheme of things, it's the right thing to do. Whereas again, in the book, it's kind of murky, Because
I don't know. I thought it was pretty murky in the film too. I mean, certainly Rorschach never signed on to it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was another problem too that never gets mentioned. Is that but it kind of was more mentioned in the novel than it was in the movie. Is that a lot of these people that got involved in Ozymandias' plans, nobody signed up for it. And like I understand you're trying to sign a nuclear war, but it's like. that's the only thing I didn't like about Watchmen was Dr. Manhattan, because it's like, look, Dr. Manhattan, you actually could stop the war. All you would have to do is just say you're not going to fight for either side, and if either side launches a nuclear weapon, regardless of who launched it or whatnot, you're going to stop it, because he could do it, but he doesn't do it because he's like, oh, there's no point. The universe wouldn't care.
Well,
it's like,
the point was that Manhattan is becoming further and further removed from humanity.
yeah.
He's losing his humanity just to become this, this ultimate being, but the ultimate being is completely detached from, anything human or anything to care about.
Yeah. And not to mention, and I do agree, that's why I kind of like Rorschach to begin with. And here's another thing too, and why I think Ozymandias' plan is doomed to fail. Problems in the long run is because the thing is, someone's gonna find out eventually. Like they said with Rorschach, someone is gonna find the truth. And here's the thing: people don't like being lied to, and you know what's gonna happen? I actually heard one interesting idea of a fanfic that involved, the comic book, and it turns out they go to the future and discover that the world is 10 times worse because of Ozymandias' plan, because they thought aliens were going to invade Earth, so the US and Soviet Union began building up all these equipment and high-tech weapons to defeat a space alien, and what they ended up doing was they found a race of aliens that were very similar to the squids he used, and they attacked them recklessly, but the aliens literally had nothing to do with the attack for obvious purposes, so they think Earth is being aggressive, so they counterattack.
I'm kind of wondering, though, if that's going to be, some of the fallout of this election, because if you've been paying attention to what's going on, and I don't mean following the news media, because they're all like, oh, no, there's no election fraud, Trump's just being a conspiracy crank. There are some serious problems being uncovered with voting machines and the way votes are counted, and all things like this, and all sorts of things that are at least the appearance of impropriety. And it's like, with the news media doing everything they can to convince people that's not happening, how are people going to react when it all finally comes out?
Yeah, exactly.
Which, again, let me make sure before I get blamed, I am not saying that Trump really won. I'm not saying Trump's going to be president.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of crap going on. And I hate to break it to you, but it's always been going on. The difference is now we're shining a light on it.
Yeah. Rorschach or Punisher. Well, here's the thing, Schism. If you replaced Rorschach with the Punisher, none of the events would have happened because the Punisher would have defeated them all. If I recall correctly, in the Marvel comics, the Punisher at one point defeated almost all of the Avengers at one point. I don't know, I'm not that big of a comic guy, I just read that somewhere.
I don't know. I did read something interesting because, Watchmen is kind of detached from the rest of the Marvel universe. Apparently, he always wanted them to be his own heroes, but to try and sell it to them, he said, "Oh yeah, this is going to be an alternate universe where they've all become corrupt," knowing, of course, that they wanted, to do more continuous things with their alternate universes, and they would turn it down and say, hey, instead of doing that, why don't you create your own heroes? Which is what he wanted to do all the time.
Yeah. You know what else is kind of funny in a lot of these alternate history universes? Like, I understand it's alternate history, but one thing I do agree with, and some people have pointed this out, it's like, listen, the biggest pet peeve with alternate history is that they assume because one thing happened, that means all the laws of physics, go out the door. Like for instance, there's a lot of alternate history where because so-and-so happened, the Soviet Union is still around. It's like, listen, the Soviet Union collapsed for a reason.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything the U.S. did.
Yep. It kind of reminds me...
Mises predicted it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, the Fallout universe, too, because it has this alternate universe, and I'm just thinking, it's like the more you dig into the Fallout universe, the less and less it makes sense, because it's like, listen, they harness the power of the atom. How the hell are they going through an energy shortage? How are they going through a resource shortage? Because they've got the nuclear power plants to power all their electricity and all that. And I mean, yeah, you still need, petroleum for things like plastics, but you said earlier that you can actually make plastics out of non-petroleum based stuff. So, and here's another
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, it's just crazy. It's government that's in the way of all this. We
And
could have cheap, safe, affordable, carbon-free power for basically everything right now if we wanted it. The only thing that's in the way is politicians.
And you know what's another thing that's also laughable about the Fallout universe is that the enemy that ultimately caused the global war to occur was China, and judging by the behavior and characteristics, it's mentioned that China never underwent the reforms. And I'm just thinking, if China didn't go through the economic reforms it did in the 80s like it did in real life, there wouldn't be a China to threaten the United States because it would be severely depopulated because like 80% of the population would have starved to death. China didn't reform because it saw the light. It reformed itself in the 80s because it had no choice. It was basically we either insist on being diehard uber national Maoists, or we swallow our pride and start trading with the United States and behave somewhat capitalistic and feed ourselves.
Dogs, I think, have really good internal clocks because, I mean, it's 10:15. Used to be Heather's store closed at 10, and so she'd be getting home right about now, and so he's gone back out in the living room expecting her to be back any time now. Well, they close at 11 now.
Yeah.
And so he knows what time she's been home, what time she's, supposed to be home. His clock keeps up with it, and it hasn't quite gotten on the fact that that she works an extra hour now.
Yeah. Hope this isn't too TMI, but has he ever interrupted a romantic moment between you and Heather?
Oh, he is a constant gooseberry.
Yeah.
Moments.
Yeah.
Anytime we tried to do something together, he's right in there, his nose in. Can I be a part of this?
Yeah.
What you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind
just like a little kid, because if you have a toddler or something, and your kid's around all over the place, and you're just standing in the kitchen or something, giving each other a hug. Guess what? Before too long, you're going to have another pair of arms wrapped around your legs because your toddler's come up and to be with you. It's just like having a kid.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's like so. Where were we? Oh, I remember, honey. Oh, you handsome beast. Daddy, what are you doing to mommy? Mommy? Yeah.
Yeah, things just aren't as sexy when a dog is staring at you while you're doing it.
I mean, yeah, dogs are less aware than, little kids, but in all honesty, that kind of makes it even more awkward because, I mean, with a little kid, you can always just send them back to bed and just say, don't worry, he's only 2 years old, he's not going to remember it, and even if he does, he's not going to understand the context of it. With dogs, it's like,
I don't know, I don't think they have a clue.
Yeah.
Especially not because he's been fixed. So
you didn't fix him.
Yeah, I said he's been fixed. He's been fixed.
Oh.
He has been fixed.
Yeah.
One of the things we did.
Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, spaying and neutering your pets is important and it's a good thing you should do, but I do agree we get a little too mean to people who don't fix their pets because if I recall correctly, while it is rare, there actually are some legitimate reasons for not fixing your pets.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I've heard one
But if you have a pet that isn't spayed or neutered, you need to really make sure you keep control of them.
Yeah. Though I have heard one problem with a lot of pet owners is that we're actually fixing our pets a little too early, it's like there's a lot of people that are like, it's like, you got to get them fixed knowing what you're doing, but I've actually heard you kind of want them to get a little bit into adulthood before you fix them because they need those.
Oh yeah, you want them to be a year old.
Yeah.
Before you do it.
Yeah, that's what a lot of vets actually say. They say you should probably wait until they're a year older, or in some cases till they're quote unquote adults, because if you don't, you're going to give them severe health problems in the long run because they're not going to get those much needed hormones and chromosomes in their system.
Yeah, there's no way North Korea is threatening South Korea. You don't even have to look at the Gulf War. All you have to do is look at that satellite picture of the peninsula at night and see South Korea, lit up all over the place, and then North Korea is basically blank except for that.
North Korea is a big threat. Yeah, they've got old, outdated. So and it's pretty funny because a lot of people are like, yeah, but the North Koreans have more artillery pieces than the South Koreans do. And I'm like, yeah, and you know what? Most of those are they're completely rusted out. 1950s so Soviet artillery.
They can't even get a missile across the Sea of Japan.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I saw. If I were the president of the Bolshevik Party, I say we should let the North Koreans keep making their nuclear weapons. But Mr. President, why? Because it's funny. It's like watching America's fighting some videos, except in real life. See, look. Oh, is that missile gonna go up? Is it gonna go up? Oh, it fizzled.
Yeah, I just don't see them being that much of a threat. But I mean, that was something else that you kind of got to give Trump props for doing, is kind of stabilizing relationships with North Korea while still having good relations with South Korea. His foreign policy, especially since he got rid of John Bolton, it's been really good.
Yeah, that's why.
And that's one thing I'm afraid about Biden, because, like I think I said this earlier, Biden's just going to start everything up in the Middle East again. North Korea is basically a time capsule. Yep.
Yeah. So's Cuba. Because a lot of people have jokingly said that when you go to Cuba, it feels like you stepped into 1950s America.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Shane, because going back to the whole thing about memory is reconstructive, I saw this one funny joke about that where there were people complaining about immigrants and they were talking about Mexicans, and it's like, Mexicans are everywhere. There's always all these Mexicans and Spanish. What's going on here? And this one older guy's like, what are you talking about? We've always had Mexicans in this area.
Which area is that?
It was just a random area, but the joke was that despite what some people believe, we've had a large Mexican population going back as early as the 1900s, especially...
even earlier than that. I mean, that was pretty much half of the West was Mexicans. People think of cowboys as being white people. Well, they would have been white, and they would have been black, and they would have been, Mexican or, Latino. Yeah, they would have been, or even Chinese. There were just all sorts of people living out there in the West.
Well,
and believe it or not, and also, despite what movies like to portray, from what I've read, they actually mostly got along pretty well. Whites, blacks, and all that, they got along pretty well because, there was no incentive to be racist. It wasn't until the federal government expanded that the racism started appearing.
Well, and it was just
I went to San Antonio for a holiday a couple of years back, and looking into the history of like the Texan Revolution and the Alamo and all that, you had American settlers from the 13 colonies, and then Mexican and Spanish settlers basically living together with almost no problem, and all of them rebelled against the Mexican government. It wasn't like the Texans rebelled and the Mexicans. No, they were all sick of Mexico, of the Mexican government trying to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
By the way, going back, I saw this one person that was trying to debunk, the whole remember the Alamo, and they were talking about how, well, did you know that one of the reasons Texas rebelled was because they wanted to keep their slaves when Mexico wanted to end it? And I looked it up, and yes, slavery was kind of an issue, but it was one out of the hundreds and hundreds of complaints that the American settlers had against the Mexican government. And the main reason they rebelled had nothing to do with slavery. It was because of not respecting property rights.
That and the Mexican government was trying to crack down on weapons ownership, which is where the come and take it flag comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, people, but, it's like a lot of people like to talk about, the Mexican. They like to think that it was evil, big, bad America being mean to Mexico, but the truth is Mexico was partially to blame for its own problems in the 1840s. Yeah, people fail to realize America wasn't the big empire it was in the 1840s, and if anything, at the time, one could argue Mexico was actually more powerful than the United States.
But it's just funny how our image of the West is basically from movies, and in those classic movies, of course, we think of cowboys as being white because they cast all these white people to play cowboys. And I remember in a lot of movies, it was kind of a thing to do when you needed to portray Indians. For some reason, you cast Jewish people as Indians. I don't know why. I don't know. But that was the reason. That was the reason why the Indians in Blazing Saddles were speaking Yiddish. Mel Brooks was just making fun of all that.
Yeah. That also kind of reminds me about how they made Hermione black in the Cursed Child play, even though it's kind of pretty well established in other artwork that she was white. And one joke is that they do a whole 19 years later, and Harry Potter's come back, and he's a stereotypical Jersey Shore Mexican, and he's like, hey, Effie's, and Ron's like, Harry, what the hell happened to you? What? Nothing, Ron. It's me, amigo Harry. Remember, man? Because. And look, it's not a thing about race baiting. It's just that, I just want some consistency here, It's like imagine.
Yeah, they did a couple of race flips with the minor characters in the movies.
Well, to be fair, some of them, like Dean Thomas, weren't really described racially, so they were up for interpretation.
Well, yeah, I mean that was fine, but it was like, oh God, who was it? She was little more than an extra in the first couple of movies, and then in the third movie, I forget which character it was, but she was played by a white girl. Or was it the other way around? I don't remember. There was a race flip there.
It's one thing I will say, and this makes no sense in the Harry Potter universe, and I think I've mentioned this before, is that wizards are portrayed as being like very, they're very open, they're very, gender neutral in their laws and all that, and both men, women, and minorities are all that. And I'm like, listen, if the wizards are stuck in the 1800s, they should be misogynists and diehard racist because they never went through the Enlightenment movement.
Well, I think the main idea was, this goes to the narcissism of small differences. Their version of the racism was blood purity.
Yeah.
How were you pure blood wizard, or were you half blood, or what was it they called wizards that were born to muggles?
Mudblood. Yeah.
Mudbloods, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would explain why the majority of the Death Eaters are inbred freaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I would love. That's what I would say to Lord Voldemort if he was gonna execute me. I'd say, I just have one final thing to say. How the hell are you guys superior? Look at you guys. You're all a bunch of inbred retards. How are you superior? Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to get more into Voldemort's motivations, because Voldemort was a half-blood, but he was making out like he was a pure-blood, and he was exploiting the pure-blood bias to get power for himself, but, It was, I get that he's really a MacGuffin. He's just the catalyst for the story and not really a main part of it, but still. Would have been nice to get a little more of what was going on in his mind.
Not to mention, it's like, listen, J.K. Rowling, I know you're trying to portray his dad in a bad way, and you're trying to say, oh, he never would have been evil if his dad stuck around. It's like, guys, let's be real here. By strict legal definition, Miss Gomp raped Tom Sr.
Yeah.
She drugged him with a potion that took away his free will, and she used that,
Mm-hmm. That's like the ultimate rape drug. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have actually pointed out that's kind of messed up about the Harry Potter universe, is that they have these love potions, and I'm like, dude, that's the ultimate date rape drug right there. Give them a pill that takes away their free will, and they'll do whatever they want,
Why wouldn't that be unforgivable,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. That's the thing that makes no sense about the unforgivable curses. It's because it's like, well, there's these 3 curses and they're all unforgivable. One kills you, one tortures you, and one takes over your mind. And I'm like, There's hundreds of spells that already do that. How come they're
Well,
not
but I mean,
considered unforgivable?
if you can make a reliable love potion like that, why would you need anything else to fight a war? All you have to do is rig it up so that, one person drinks the love potion and then, immediately sees the wrong person, like on an enemy side or something like that, and create all these love triangles all over the place and just watch everyone destroy themselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, the time turners will be a pretty amazing weapon too. And you had all these potential weapons, and then you have this wizarding war, and they're not used.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean really, aside from just resolving the plot in Prisoner of Azkaban, what was really the point of introducing time turners? Because as far as the overall story arc was concerned, they didn't use them. They didn't really need them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I say, J.K. Rowling, she's good at creating likable characters and all that, and she's a good like to make the story flow, but she's terrible when it comes to setting up a lore and keeping consistent rules of the lore, So, it's funny, a lot of people love to hate on the movies, because they're like, oh, they're breaking all these rules and consistent. Well, the truth is there was a lot of that in the books too.
But it's like they made sure to point out that, the time travel with the time turners is Novikov consistent. And if you know that, just give me enough time turners to supply with my army, and I'll defeat any enemy that comes by. Because all I have to do is rig up a situation where anything that doesn't result in victory results in a paradox. So the only Novikov consistent result is a victory.
Yeah, if the wizards were so powerful, they would not have to hide from muggles. You know what? My personal theory, and it's kind of implied, is that the wizards, especially in the books, they're not as powerful as they think they are, and the problem is that they're so used to magic doing everything that the attitude I get from reading the books is that the wizards are, mindset-wise, they're stuck. They can't think outside the box. They can't be creative. They can't, think of a rational explanation for anything because they're so used to magic doing everything for them. That's why I think that's the real reason why they're hiding. It's not because they're afraid of oppression. It's because if they were to open up and try to interact, they would discover that the muggles have arguably surpassed them in almost every single way, I mean, that's why they're hiding, because I think it's because they're just stubborn. They want to think they're better than non-magical people and more peaceful, but then if they were to open up and actually learn, they'd be like, wait a minute, the muggles are doing far better than us. They have more rights and better stuff than we do. Oh shit, maybe magic's not as good as we thought it was.
Well, look at how much stuff with magic you can do with technology. And even more, because there's all sorts of things that I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but they're like, oh yeah, we got to send them to the incurable ward. It's like, just give them some freaking antibiotics.
Yeah. Actually, I actually thought of because I'm a sick guy. I was coming up with a list of easy ways a muggle could kill a wizard. And one interesting thing I thought of that would actually make a lot of sense and would actually work is to poison the wizard, but use a quote unquote muggle poison like cyanide or ricin, because not only are they quick acting, but even if they show the symptoms, a healer, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to think, oh, it's got to be a draught of the living dead, I'm going to do that. So they're going to give them all this stuff. And unless they have a Bezoar in their pocket, which according to the books are described as being incredibly rare and super expensive, they're screwed.
Yep.
Because they've got,
any kind of germ warfare would just wipe out the wizarding side.
Well, yeah, because it's kind of established that, with the exception of a couple of potions, they don't have broad-spectrum antibiotics, antitoxin, and antivirals. I mean, they have things like the Wiggenwell potion, but those potions only work against specific types of, magical ailments or all that. If they just catch a really nasty case of the flu, there's no potion in the world that's going to save them.
And apparently they have no treatment for mental illness either.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, come on, get these people to the muggle side of things. Get them a good therapist. Maybe a
Oh,
good
yeah.
psychiatrist who can prescribe them the right medication.
Yeah. Oh yeah, actually, I ultimately say I think, you know, guns would be the best way to kill a wizard if you can, because I mean it's established in the third book. Most wizards don't even know what the hell a gun is, and
Yeah.
and people are like, oh well, they have things like Protego. Well, first of all, we don't know if that would work on a physical projectile like a bullet, and second of all, bullets travel faster than most human reflexes are, and as superhumans, as wizards are portrayed, they don't have, you know, super duper hero like reflexes.
Well, I mean, it should have been so easy for Voldemort to win right off the bat, because the whole idea of keeping Harry with his aunt and uncle is that he was protected by his family, and Voldemort, you know, couldn't go near him as long as he was with his family. But there are these things called sniper rifles.
Yeah.
You don't need to get near them. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, in all honesty, that's why I'm sorry, but the wizards in Harry Potter, they are not these perfect beings that people think they are, you know?
I kind of see it as like being that one scene in Indiana Jones where you got that guy who's doing all these crazy martial arts moves, and Indy just gives him that look and shoots him.
Yeah. Fun fact, I'm pretty sure almost everyone knows this. He originally was supposed to have this epic, you know, fight and retrieval of the sword, but the reason they did that was because Harrison Ford was incredibly sick with dysentery, and after he keeled over because he was experiencing terrible stomach cramps, he's like, can't he just shoot the guy? He's got a revolver. Why does he need to use this whip and this complicated stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Just shoot him. Yeah, just
Yep.
shoot him. Yeah.
Yep. Martial arts
anything-
versus gun, the gun wins.
Yeah.
Never bring nothing to a gunfight.
Yeah. And by the way, that was one Mythbusters episode I didn't like, was they were talking about a knife in a gunfight, and they were talking about how, well, the knife may be good at close range because, you know, the guy has to pick up the gun and cock the slide back. It's like, well, first of all, most people don't actually do that. A lot of people, especially if they're really good with guns, they actually carry with a round in the chamber. And contrary to popular belief, that actually is relatively safe, you know, especially with modern day safeties.
Yeah, because guns have a drop safety nowadays.
Yeah,
they would keep the first round cocked, or just have, you know, a semi-auto, because I think he was wasn't it like a 12 gauge shotgun he was simulating with it? Okay, well, you know, AR-15, AK-47, anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, give me a 100-round drum.
Well, I don't really see proper use of a firearm as being different from a martial arts. Like that, you know,
I mean,
training
technically,
and techniques
yeah.
used in handling a gun is in and of itself a martial art. Like when people hear martial art, they immediately think, you know, Asian hand-to-hand martial arts. But no, Europeans had martial arts. It's just they involved swords.
Europeans had really sophisticated
guns.
martial arts. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
swords and mace and all that. Yeah.
There's not really much difference between moving through the motions and strikes of a sword as it is, you know, employing a firearm, switching between targets, all of these things you got to think about, like, you know, breath control, stance, trigger control. That's all a martial art.
Well, it was the fact that they had access to different kinds of steel, and that meant they had different kinds of weapons and different kinds of armor.
It's not necessarily access to different kinds of steel, but Europeans discovered
steel was a lot of it.
Well, one, they had a lot more access to iron ore than places like Japan and especially Eastern China had, because Japan and Eastern China, iron ore is actually fairly rare and not the best quality, while Europe actually has a lot more of it in better qualities. And the other thing was that in Japan, they never discovered a furnace that could burn hot enough to completely melt iron, which means that large-scale steel production is impossible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's like people are talking about, like, the methods for making, you know, katana, you know, all the folding and heating and folding and heating and folding and heating.
Yeah,
that was because they couldn't melt it. Yeah,
you have to do that in order to make a homogeneous billet of steel to make a sword out of, because you can't just melt it and cast it.
Yeah, a VX rocket versus Hogwarts, you know. That's another thing too. I highly doubt the Wizarding World would survive a nuclear war because I'm sorry, radiation don't care. You know.
Oh, we're warded against all sorts of magic. Yeah, well, this is a thing called a Stinger missile.
Yeah.
I think they explain that away in the books. It's like, apparently at Hogwarts, there's this huge area around Hogwarts where electronics just stop working and malfunctioning, all that, and compasses stop working and stuff, just to try and keep it hidden.
But missiles are ballistic. They don't need any of that. Just get them going.
Yeah, the guidance and sometimes the fuses can still be electronic.
Hogwarts is not a moving object.
Fuse would still work.
You don't need that because Hogwarts is not a moving object. You just set it. It's going to go up. It's going to come down where you say.
Yeah, seriously, Voldemort. You wanna destroy Hogwarts so badly? You're in England. Have your Death Eaters apparate into the British military, steal some ballistic missiles, and deploy them against Hogwarts.
As long as you're using a non-electronic fuse, like something like a percussion fuse or impact fuse or something like that, it'll still work.
And guns don't use electronics, except, something like a laser sight or something like that. But, the mechanism of action in a firearm is not in any way electronic. It's all mechanical and chemical.
Yeah. Yeah, in all honesty...
And really, the only reason why that makes sense as to why electronics would fail is if there's some sort of interference between magic and electronics, in which case just shields are electronics.
Yeah, which a lot of things have now. In all honesty, and again, going back to this, my personal headcanon is that in real life, Hogwarts is much more vulnerable than people think, and not just against magic, but against things in general. But like I said, because wizards and witches are so reliant on magic, their creativity has atrophied, so they can't think about that, Probably one that made me laugh the most and just showed how stupid the wizards are and not realize it is when Arthur Weasley says, "My secret is to figure out how planes fly." It's like, that's basic physics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just go pick up a book, It's
basic physics,
It's like if magic and electricity interact with one another, I wonder if you could stop spells with a Faraday cage.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, China never had plate armor. Yeah, I think that's also one reason, because the European swords were meant a lot more for stabbing than you had in Asia. And a lot of that was trying to get through the plate armor.
Although they were also larger and heavier.
Well, could an EMP take out? Could an EMP take out a wizard? That's a question.
Yeah.
Just set a really good-sized pinch outside the wards, aim it at Hogwarts, turn it on, see what happens.
Yeah. In all honesty, I think that's the reason why wizards are so secretive. It's not because Muggles would want magic to solve all their problems. It's because if Muggles were able to gain access to some of this magic and absorb it and figure out what makes it tick, basically magic would become useless and obsolete in the wizarding world.
Yeah.
Because we'd figure out a way to electronically create it. In all honesty, when you really think about it, a lot of modern day technology is actually better than a lot of the magical stuff, because it's like, well, first of all,
imagine how much easier a lot of the stuff in the books would have been if the wizards had smartphones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. They're still using owls or those flying things. It's like, it still takes time for the spell to work, and even then it can't work with certain people where, like I said with Arthur Weasley, imagine if they had a smartphone. They could have just been like 999, what's your emergency? Yeah, there's a man who's been bitten by a highly toxic venomous snake, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And also going back to what we said about medicine, I think if they had access, to Muggle medicine, they actually would have much better been able to help Arthur Weasley when he cured Nagini, because it's like literally all they were doing was just keeping him shut and trying to find an antidote. It's like, well, you know what Muggle doctors do when they don't have a cure for something? They can still treat you because they can treat the symptoms, because that's usually what kills you when you're
they can treat the degenerative effects.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's usually what actually kills you when you're sick or poisoned. It's not the poison or the bacteria, it's how your body's reacting to it, that's how the flu kills you. The flu virus itself doesn't kill you. It's because it triggers a reaction from your immune system that's so aggressive, and they try to fight the virus so hard that they inflame your veins, but your immune system doesn't realize, well, yeah, you can get to the virus easily, but now the lungs can't breathe.
Why would the basilisk be a problem? Because wasn't it a basilisk that Neville killed in the last one?
No, that was
With
just
the sword?
Nagini. She was actually, if I recall correctly, Nagini was actually a human. She was transformed into a magical snake.
Oh, I was thinking
Yeah.
that was a basilisk. I don't know.
The basilisk was in the second movie. Nagini was just
Yeah, but wasn't the basilisk like the symbol of Slytherin and everything?
Nah, just the snake, just the serpent in
Yeah.
general.
The problem with the Dementors is they never really explained what they are.
Yeah.
Give a Muggle a chance to figure one out.
Yeah, exactly.
Fly a drone around it and have it, have all sorts of, infrared and everything else.
Well, they say that Muggles can't see Dementors and all that. And in all honesty, that's another thing I hate about the Wizarding World. It's like there are actual things out there that could easily kill Muggles because they don't know about it. And it's like, well, why can't they? So they can actually properly prepare themselves and learn how to do it. I mean, it's like, that's what I hate about the Ministry of Magic. They're like, oh, that's because we'll get everything, we'll fix everything. It's like, oh, we got overthrown by Voldemort. It's like, if anything, Voldemort is proof of why the Wizarding World shouldn't be isolationist and secretive.
Oh, kill with just a stare. Yeah, we've known how to deal with that since Perseus. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a little thing called a mirror.
Well, no, it paralyzes you if you look at it through a mirror. But I'm just wondering, what would happen if you looked at it through a camera?
Yeah, I mean, you're not even there. You're just flying your drone around it.
Well, I mean, I know Colin got petrified, but again, he was still physically in front of the snake. He just was looking.
Well, no, he
through
was
it,
looking through the camera lens, which is a series of mirrors. I'm talking about like a fully electronic camera that records
like remote,
and then display.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
remote.
Mm-hmm. But if that did work, if that did work and it could kill anyone, then all you'd have to do is take a picture of the basilisk and show it to all of your enemies, and they drop dead immediately.
Even if it's still paralyzed through a recording, you could still make robots that can detect, that can figure out what a basilisk is and recognize one, and then just shoot it.
Yeah.
Oh shit, we got a basilisk kicking around. Deploy the killbots.
Yeah. Yeah. In all honesty, that's why I think, and actually, all this discussion, I actually remember hearing something about it. A lot of people have said Harry Potter is a perfect example of why urban fantasies rarely work. Because, let's face it, when you really think about it, technology is superior to almost anything that magic can do. And that's why magic only works in a medieval setting, when the best a non-magic user has is a sword and a shield. With today's modern technology, anything a powerful wizard can do can easily be countered with the right amount of technology and knowledge.
Or just a drone.
Well, the best urban fantasies I've read are ones that, because they have magic, the things that the magic does basically replaces technology. It's like we have this way of magically sending messages to each other. So the telephone was never invented. Radio,
right? They never had a need for.
They have never had a need for that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how that works. I have a quickie on this, by the way, because a lot of people think of the wheel as something that, primitive people just, figure it out, and that's just kind of the natural progression. Nope. It was a single invention back in ancient Sumeria, 6,000 or 7,000 years ago or something, and all of the uses of the wheel trace back to that.
Oh no, Rika just informed me 2020 claimed another. You probably never heard.
You cut out there.
Oh, sorry. I just got informed in the Discord chat. 2020 claimed another famous celebrity, a guy called Kirby Morrow. For those of you who don't know, he was a Canadian voice actor that did a lot of dubbing in anime, and his most famous role was he voiced Miroku in Inuyasha. That's sad.
Wes sends his apologies. I would have joined you guys, but I had to help my uncle clean a deer, and my jaw's killing me tonight. Yeah, That's a good excuse. Cleaning a deer is a very good excuse.
Yeah. I almost brought home a deer yesterday, though not in the positive way. Yeah, I almost.
Well,
ran over
I know at least in North Carolina, if you hit a deer, they give you the option of keeping it. And what you can do if you want to is you just have it sent to a local butcher's, and they'll butcher it up and give it to you, and you just put it in your deep freeze, and you have venison all winter.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard you can do that. Yeah, I've heard a lot of states allow you to do that. If you run over a deer and kill it, and it's around hunting season, all you got to do is contact the authorities, and if you want to claim it, they're, like I said, all you got to do is just contact them, pay, the fee, and it's yours. Yeah.
Punk wants us to talk about gun chucks. I don't know what they are, but
we're
it
not
sounds
going to
really
talk
dangerous.
about gun chucks because gun chucks are stupid.
It sounds stupid. Is it what I'm picturing in my head?
It's nunchucks just made out of guns.
Yeah.
Well, nunchucks.
So, like, you're holding one gun and you're swinging the other one around. Yeah, really bad idea.
Well, nunchucks themselves are terrible weapons. I even read somewhere that, contrary to popular belief, nunchucks were almost never used as weapons. They were used more for like grappling or binding people. Like if you captured an enemy.
Yeah. They were used for restraint. Like if you wanted to hold someone, grab them by the wrist or something, you use nunchucks for that.
Yeah.
But the whole sort of that's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you could see where it could be used as a weapon because it's basically a different form of flail.
Yeah, but I mean, that's when you just go whack
to
someone.
use.
That's all you'd have to do is just go whack someone. You wouldn't have to do all the crazy things like over your shoulders and everything.
But that's just a way of showing off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what else is further proof that wizards are terrible when it comes to technology that's not magical? Look at Godric Gryffindor's sword. Yeah. I saw one guy said, okay, first of all, that's not what a sword from the 10th century would have looked like. 10th century swords were more basic and not very complicated. And second of all, that is not a sword. That is just an oversized toothpick made of metal.
Yeah, I don't recall what it looks like off the top of my head.
It looks like a more stereotypical medieval sword, but it's tiny. And also, I'm sorry, but people have every right to distrust goblins because from what I've read in the books about goblins are basically scam artists by nature.
Yeah, the economics of the wizarding world makes no sense whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
All you'd need is a halfway creative muggle who understands exchange rates. Give him 3 weeks and he owns the wizarding world.
Yeah. And by the way, J.K. Rowling said that the gold galleons, are like they're like 10 pounds each. It's like, listen, that only shows how little she knows about economics. Like if the gold galleons were legitimately made of gold, each individual piece would at least be worth $200.
Well, they from the size of them, even if they're pure gold, they'd be a few ounces. But I mean, that would still be thousands of dollars.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
So yeah, you take your gold galleon, go over to the Muggle world, exchange it for money, buy some stuff, go back to the Wizarding world, sell the stuff. Set up a shop in Hogsmeade or something like that. Yeah. You get paid. You go to the bank. You exchange it for however many galleons it worth. Rinse, repeat. You got it made.
And not to mention, it seems like Gringotts is the only place where wizards can get money. It's like, well, what if something happens to Gringotts? You're screwed. Yep. Yeah.
I'm thinking of a missile again.
Yeah.
Missile's gonna get right past that waterfall thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, but how did you get into our vault? That's impossible. Our vault is guarded by magic and all that. How'd you get through it? I used a thermal lance to cut through the door. A thermal lance isn't magical.
Yep.
I mean, I'm pretty sure
just napalm. Just napalm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's tougher than that, but still, like, if you can come up with some tool that theoretically could punch through the wall, it's like they'd be screwed, because that's the problem. It's protected against all these magical attacks, but what if someone does something unorthodox,
Well, that's the thing, SKM. They were the whole point of the galleons is that it's goblin gold, which is as pure as you can get, and that's the whole point. Goblin gold is pretty much pure. But we can do quad 9s. How much more pure do you need?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't like goblins, and no offense, but I mean, I understand you're not supposed to be mean to goblins, but come on, they're not helping themselves, I mean, another thing that really pisses me off about goblins is that they don't believe in private property. It's like if you commission them to make something, they're like, "Oh no, it's never yours. I'm just loaning it to you."
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't. There's not an actual exchange. Yeah. They consider that they actually own all the gold.
Yeah, they own everything they make. We're just loaning it to you. It's like, no, it don't work like that, buddy. It don't work like that. In all honesty, I think the only reason why people do business with them is simply because they appear to have some sort of government-backed monopoly. If they didn't have that, nobody would do business with them because they wouldn't be trustworthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then again, to be fair, and actually J.K. Rowling herself has said this, the reason why a lot of stuff comes off as cringy or not making any sense is because, and she did admit this, she wrote the books back when she wasn't in a really good stable mind. She had went through a divorce and she was struggling, and basically she was partially ranting about what she hated in the world. And now that she's matured a little bit, she realizes that the world isn't like the way, Harry Potter portrays it, And that's another thing too. And that's another thing too that's so silly. It's like they always talk about how Muggles are evil people and all that. It's like, look, the only Muggles we see that are mean is the Dursleys and Snape's dad. It's like,
yeah.
It's like that's what I want to ask them. It's like, well, how would you?
I mean, Hermione's parents are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't see much of them, but they're good people. They're dentists. They're
Yeah, it's like they're all like well, how would you know Muggles, would be mean to wizards and they would automatically declare a genocide if they saw wizards? Well, they did it in the past. So?
Yeah.
By that logic, you can't trust a German because he might be a Nazi, it's, and again, it just shows how stuck, the wizards and witches are mentally. It's like they can't see anything past their pseudo 14th century magic sorcery, In all honesty, I think, that kind of was their downfall in the books, is that they just couldn't think like that. And Voldemort, for all his flaws, was kind of thinking that way, while he never adapted Muggle tactics, he was using Muggle psychological warfare, on them because they kept, thinking, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to, why isn't this working? That's basically what was going on in books 6 and 7. The Ministry of Magic was doing everything that that they had done in the past before, and they were just like, it's not working. Why isn't it not working?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but how dare the wizards think they're better than Muggles when their prison system makes San Quentin look like a 5-star hotel?
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure if you took the most dangerous person from San Quentin and says, listen, you can spend 30 years in San Quentin or 1 year in Azkaban, within 5 minutes he's going to be like, can you take me back to San Quentin?
Wands actually seem very fragile. Yeah, that was a weird thing about the movie, because you have whichever one that was, it was one of the 3 Deadly Hallows, and Dumbledore got it, and then Harry got it. In the book, the way Harry gets rid of it is he buries it with Dumbledore. And then all Harry has to do is die without passing the wand on to anyone else, which he can't do because it's buried with Dumbledore. And then in the movie, he just breaks it with his hands. I'm like, what? That's all you have to do.
Why didn't Dumbledore do that? Because
the Elder Wand, that's what it's called, the Elder Wand.
Yeah, he had the Elder Wand. Why didn't he do that?
Well, you can just break it? What kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. See, here's my theory about wands. And this is actually how how I think Muggles would fare a lot better, you know, or at least Muggle knowledge in the magical world, because whatever makes a magician instead of a Muggle, you need that. But if you're talking about wands, wands are basically a part of a magic animal inside some piece of wood. And so it's clear that it's some kind of magical conductor with the wood as basically like an insulator, but it helps the wizard focus their magic. And you have to find the right magic because you have to find the one that's in tune to the wizard. Well, what would happen if a wizard took his own hair, braided it, straightened it through? I mean, pretty much any... If you're using your own hair, that would have to be a match for yourself. So just with the knowledge that a wizard is a magical creature, you know, you use your own hair to make a wand, you know, and then you've got the most powerful wand.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, you know.
And why did no one experiment with multi-wand magic?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the things you can do with more than one wand?
And that's another thing. And that's another thing too. Like, they're always talking about how this wizard invented this wizard invented that, and I'm like, how the hell do you invent spells? Do you just take a wand and wish it around and say fake Greek and Latin until something happens? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if Wingardium Leviosa will work.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's all like, oh, you know, you're doing Expelliarmus. Oh, he got rid of his wand. Oh, well, here's my next wand.
Yeah.
I got a whole sleeve full of wands here.
Yeah.
It's called a backup weapon.
Yeah. And I mean, that's another thing that's not really well cleared is that, you know, they say the wand always chooses the wizard, but, you know, it is also said that wands can be loaned and all that. It's like, well, what's going on? Now, to be fair, I've heard...
Yeah, I mean, if you have a duel with a wizard and you take their wand or something, apparently you can use it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Pottermore tries to explain it better. Like, they say, like, certain cores are more of this and that, like the wood, because, and all that. But again, it's just like, you know... Like, listen, if the wand chooses the wizard, like you said, just use your own hair, because then it's definitely going to work for you, because it's your own hair, you know?
Yep. All right, just an 11 o'clock warning. This is where I start keeping an ear out for Heather.
Okay, it's just... Yeah. Yeah, Quiver of Wands, you know? That's another thing, too. Why did Godric Gryffindor even need a sword? If he's such a powerful wizard, why did he even need a sword?
Didn't they kind of imply, though, that in the right hands the sword was like a really big wand?
I think so, but I'm not sure. You know, it's just... Again, sorry, but this is why urban fantasy doesn't work, just because, like I said, once technology is added in, everything is done.
Well, no, it can work. You just have to sit down and think through how it's all going, all the ramifications.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same way with any high tech. We've talked about this before with Star Trek and the replicators. If you take even just our modern society and you add in replicators, think of how much changes as soon as you have a replicator.
Schism, or is trained in hand-to-hand combat. Yeah, there's actually, in the Harry Potter book Order of the Phoenix, there's a scene where Harry and the Weasley twins get into a fight with Draco and his gang and all that, and they're punching each other, and they're scolded for saying, "And you resorted to Muggle dueling?"
Well, the thing about the Death Eaters, though, is they actually did emphasize wandless magic.
Yeah.
They said the best combat was with wordless, wandless magic.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, having to say a magic spell, you're announcing your attack.
Yeah.
So if you can do it wordlessly, you can...
Well, that's another thing, too, that the movies were kind of mean about, is because in the books, you know, the reason why even the most powerful wizards, you know, often, you know, called out their spells is because voiceless, wandless magic is extremely difficult to pull off, and it can be done if you're quiet and concentrating, but if it's on the fly, it's almost next to impossible to do.
Well, and apparently you can't just learn wordless magic. You have to learn the specific spell wordlessly, so you have a very limited repertoire you can do with that.
Yeah.
Oh, great, another superlative. Favorite movie and ANCAP book. That's not grammatically sensible.
Well, we all know the answer for the book. It's Amun is a Harsh Mistress.
I mean, that's a good one. Does he just say favorite movie or favorite ANCAP movie?
What is your favorite movie and ANCAP book?
Favorite movie, I guess I usually say 2001 for that. Because that's just... What more could you ask except for maybe a shorter Stargate sequence? But
if I were to ever write a series of urban fantasy novels, I would have like the implements you use magic for. Different materials work better for different spells. Like if you were to build, say, a wand that you wanted to use primarily for combat magic, you would use it out of like recycled sword, steel, or things that have seen combat. If you wanted to make something, an implement designed primarily to heal someone, you would want to use things like silver or stainless steel, or things that we would use in medicine and stuff like that. If you wanted to make something that's supposed to act on its own, you would use things like copper.
Well, now, if you can actually have a technological understanding of magic as it exists in the Potterverse, you can have free energy. Because that's all the magic is. There are so many different forms of energy you could make.
Yeah.
Limitless free energy.
That actually would be another funny thing about magic. It's like, wait a minute. How are you creating all this stuff without violating the laws of thermodynamics and the law of conservation of energy? And then the entire world implodes because they just broke the laws of physics.
Well, It's kind of like Aguamenti. It's like, where does the water come from?
Yeah.
Is there like a lake somewhere that has a little bit less water in it?
Or
does it pull it from the air and now it's a little less humid? They did, because I mean, they went through all the trouble of saying that, the food popping up on the table was an illusion, and it was really the house elves that did it. And when Hermione, found out about that, she went on her crusade to free the house elves. Well, what about Aguamenti? Is that just water appearing out of nowhere?
That's why I like Frozone from The Incredibles. I thought you could draw water from the air. There is no water in this air.
Yeah.
And actually, another good example is Full Metal Alchemist, because in that anime, people are capable of creating objects and summoning stuff and all that, but the rules is that, you can perform quote-unquote magic, but you can't just snap your fingers and make it appear. If you want something, you have to follow the laws of conservation of energy and all that didn't matter. You can't just summon it out of thin air. You have to have all the materials ready, and you can't magically change it, from one thing to another. You can only change, what it's like, so for instance, you could churn, if you were an alchemist in Full Metal Alchemist, you could churn, a glass of water into water vapor or steam or whatever, or ice, but you can't turn it into carbon steel because it doesn't have carbon. You can only churn it into water, something that's water related or oxygen or hydrogen related. Pipsqueak, where's my super suit? That's a funny thing.
Even the magic system from Aragon has its own version of conservation of energy, because in that series, if a wizard were to try and cast a spell that was too advanced for him, or that he didn't have the energy for, it would draw from his own life force and kill him. It's like the way to cast more powerful spells in that universe is you have to either you have to develop your own inner wellspring of energy, or you have to learn how to take energy from your surroundings.
Yeah.
But in the Potterverse, if you have a full-grown wizard who can turn into a cat, what other laws of physics can you break? You've got something that's a different size, a different mass, a different total energy level.
Yeah.
A different.
Unless it works on Animorphs physics.
Kind of reminds me of this one thing of what it's called. It's called What If Ant-Man Was Scientifically Accurate? And after Ant-Man shrinks himself to subatomic particles, he accidentally destroys the world because it's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Isn't it obvious, you idiot? By shrinking yourself that much, you made your molecules so dense you become a black hole. Yeah, contrary to popular belief, it's not just, theoretically anything can become a black hole. It's just that you need a lot of mass to do it, and then condense it very tightly.
Well, that's the thing. It's just condensed.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have a lot of mass, the black hole isn't going to last long. It's going to evaporate.
And you also have to overcome the problem of things reacting with each other when it gets that dense. That's why it's like it's one of the reasons why supernovas, like all supernovas, won't devolve into black holes, and some supernovas won't even become supernovas. They'll just become black holes anyway. One type of supernova, which is a type 2A supernova, is a star starts absorbing carbon and oxygen into its atmosphere, which of course make it collapse much faster when it ends the red giant stage. However, because it gets so dense, there's enough hydrogen left that the fusion starts to ramp up exponentially with the increased density, and causes it to explode and not become a black hole.
Swamp asks, "Are you going to do more
much hydrogen? It wouldn't explode, and it would just collapse into a black hole."
Are you ever going to do more content on gun control? Depends on what comes up. I'm mostly just reacting to, things as they happen. Whatever videos get popular or what's happening in the news.
Do you think Hogwarts is requiring face masks, or are they practicing magic over Zoom? I mean, they do have that bubblehead charm, but in all honesty, knowing how the wizarding world is, most of them won't even know what COVID-19 is.
Nope.
Yeah, it's like St. Mungo's is full of people. They're trying to think about, what is this ailment? None of our potions are working and all that, and yet all these people are dying. And then a Muggle doctor comes along. It's like, did you try administering anti-inflammatory on the chest and putting them on a respirator? And they're like, what is anti-inflammatory?
What is respirator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
I imagine like wizard medicine would basically be herbalism. Oh,
that's basically
take this herb,
that's basically what it is. Yeah, that's basically what it is.
It's pretty much it. Because if you look at their mathematical knowledge, arithmancy is basically algebra plus numerology, and it's not really that advanced. They don't even have calculus apparently.
Yeah, and in all honesty, the thing with that's the thing with their medicine is that yes, it's an instant cure, but it only cures the magical ailment you're curing it for, Again, they don't have broad-spectrum antibiotics. It's not like if you catch one magical ailment, we'll just give you, some magical jitty will potion, and that will clear you up in a couple of days. No, it's like, okay, we have to figure out what the disease is. You've got the wizard pox. Okay, we've got to create a Eldo potion, so just give me a couple days. We've got to stir it, and all that, and by that point, you're either dead or you're long recovered.
All right, our limit is up. In other words, Heather just got home, so give us your parting thoughts. Oh, now you're silent. You got anything to say, Pip?
When creating a fictional universe, you have to think through all of the consequences of what you change.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, anything, Chris?
Nope.
All right. Then, I guess you guys probably know the drill by now. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. Go to donate.bogosity.tv to help keep this channel going. So a couple of comments left. Do you think we'll see gun control laws get struck down? I don't know. We'll have to see what cases come forward, but I'm hoping so. 2016 study that combined the results of 130 studies and found the gun control was highly associated with less murder and death. I haven't heard of that one. But, all right. Anyway, so thanks everyone, Chris and Pip, and who else was here? I think Wes was here for a couple seconds, and
Executioner was.
Executioner, yeah. Thanks, Exec, for showing up. It's great to have him on. Thanks for everyone who commented. Thanks for the super chats, and